From the advent of the God of Light to the re-emergence of the Omen Star, the monstrous Genma are and have always been the centre of every conflict throughout Onimusha. While the Oni have worked to free humanity from the Genma's grip, the Genma themselves have fully embraced humanity's labelling of them as evil beings, even referring to themselves as demons. However, they weren't known, at least in the English dub, as Genma until after Blade Warriors, ironically shedding their demon label in Demon Siege. Even more ironically, the word Oni quite literally translates to demon, having gone by that name since after Warlords. On top of that, the word Genma doesn't translate to monster or demon, but illusion. With that in mind, if we were to go by their names alone, the Oni would in fact be the demons, while the Genma would simply be creatures of illusion, which could lead one to believe that the Oni were actually the bad guys. So what if they were? How would events have played out if not only the Oni were the bad guys, but the Genma were actually the good guys? Strap in everyone, this is going to change almost everything, and we're starting further back than any scenario we've ever done, so this is going to be a long one. In the beginning, during the chaos of the Earth's creation, the God of Light, known as Fortinbras, would also come into being. With this world at his disposal, he would initially create a species in his own image, the species of humanity, and soon after would then create another species known as the Genma. Here, the Genma would also be created in Fortinbras' own image, having only small differences like horns or small protrusions, and he would look at them both with equal value, rather than relegating one as slaves to the other. Instead, he would hope that the two would coexist and thrive together, a hope that he would soon witness come true. Humanity and the Genma would soon begin working together and use each other's skills to advance and thrive far faster than either would alone, and both races would enjoy very friendly relations. Fortinbras, soon seeing that the Genma were advancing in science and technology far faster than humanity, would assign 3 particularly gifted Genma as his triumvirate. Claudius would begin spreading his expert battle tactics as well as his knowledge of architecture, soon being known as the Chancellor. Rosencrantz, the scientist of the triumvirate, would be the spearhead of scientific advancement, sharing these advancements with humanity whenever possible. The aid of another brilliant scientist, Guildenstern, would skyrocket their progress, and both would find contentment in seeing those around them benefit from their accomplishments. The priestess, Ophelia, would prove to be an extremely kind and talented healer, soon mastering her usage of magic and providing medical advancements beyond humanity's capabilities. Naturally, the Genma would soon require multiple bases of operations for them to be able to conduct their research, and they would soon construct what would come to be known as the Genma Sacred Place on an island in the Philippine Sea. The fog surrounding it made it extremely difficult to find, and while they trusted humanity as a whole, they chose to keep its location hidden to keep their research classified until it was ready for application. A similar temple was constructed at the bottom of the sea for similar purposes, though this undersea temple proved to be the primary hub for Guildenstern, often conducting his research here more than anywhere else. This would also lead to the Genma building a similarly close connection with the Yagyu clan to the Oni in canon. For a time, the benevolent Fortinbras would look upon his creations with pride, but everything would change upon the arrival of another race of primordial beings called the Oni. Upon discovering the Earth as well as those living on it, the Oni clan, led by the Oni god of darkness, would wage war on the Genma, hoping to wipe them away and reduce humanity to slaves. The Genma are quick to fight back, both for their own survival as well as the continued freedom for humanity, and Fortinbras is quick to join the fray and confront the god of darkness, soon discovering the existence of 12 minor Oni gods as well. The vast majority of humanity choose to fight alongside the Genma, though the Oni would soon discover a number of more hateful humans who would rather see human dominance than coexistence, and successfully begin offering their power in exchange for total fealty. These humans would soon come to be known as Oni warriors, and would become highly feared not only for their increased speed and strength in battle, but also their ability to seal the souls of Genma within their Oni gauntlets. Thankfully, while the Oni would begin slowly building their number of Oni warriors, both the Genma and Humanity would have their own set of noteworthy warriors. The powerful and proud Osric proved to be significantly stronger than the Oni had expected, often finding himself pushing through Oni single-handedly through his pure physical strength. On the other side of the spectrum, a warrior by the name of Gugan Dantis would gain infamy among the Oni for his near impossible to match raw skill and dexterity, becoming a death sentence to any who would challenge him in single combat. As for Humanity, a team of 3 warriors would become highly feared by the Oni, combining the perfect blend of power, speed and skill to overcome any and every threat the Oni would throw at them. These warriors would be the team of Sogen Osho, Murakoto and Garganto, and as their reputation spread, the Oni would regard them as some of their most dangerous enemies. By this point, Fortinbras would order the Genma to grant their own power to trusted human warriors to better aid in the fight against the Oni, and the trio of warriors would be among the first to receive this gift, inciting further fear in the Oni as their efficiency increased. Soon, the Genma discover the existence of another subservient species of the Oni, the mysterious Mino clan. It's eventually learned that the souls of Genma sealed by Oni warriors would be trapped within the Dark Realm, a pocket dimension that the Oni maintain as a prison. The Mino are found to be capable of opening a gateway to this realm, but the Genma remain unable to find a way inside themselves. As the war continued, the trio of human warriors would continue ripping through the Oni's forces, but the Oni themselves begin to notice a chance to drive a wedge between them. While Sogen and Murakoto remain dedicated to their goal of defeating the Oni, Garganto relishes in this new power granted by the Genma and begins desiring ways to grow his strength even more. With this, the Oni would soon discreetly contact him and strike a deal, offering to gift him their own power if he would turn on his allies. While he initially refuses this deal, the prospect of even greater power becomes too tempting for him to resist, and he eventually agrees, the Oni promising to deliver on their word when he first fulfills his end of the deal. After some time, he is able to come up with a plan to set a trap for his now former allies, and soon decides to put it in place. Garganto would meet with Sogen and Murakoto and inform them of a high-value Oni target supposedly hiding within the Cave of Treachery, asking for their aid in ensuring that this target is dealt with efficiently. Having no reason to doubt him, they agree to help and follow him to the cave to complete this mission. However, having taken on a student in a monk named Saimu, Sogen insists that Saimu accompanies them as a way for him to learn from the experience. And while Garganto is initially resistant to the idea, he eventually agrees, simply assuming that Saimu would die alongside his master. The group would soon reach the Cave of Treachery, and once inside, the Oni would spring their trap, surrounding the four with a number of Oni warriors. But as they prepare for battle, Garganto would complete his betrayal and turn on them himself, instantly lunging at Sogen. Having kept his end of the bargain, the 3 remaining warriors would watch in horror as an Oni gauntlet materializes on Garganto's wrist, cementing his new allegiance with the Oni as he revels in his new Oni power. With the Oni ambush and Garganto's betrayal, it isn't long before Sogen, Murakoto and Saimu are slowly overwhelmed, though they are still able to bring down some Oni as the fight goes on. Sogen and Murakoto soon recognize that they are fighting a losing battle, especially with Garganto now turning on them, and decide to take one final drastic measure to prevent him from being let loose on their allies. Sogen orders Saimu to escape while he has the chance, and he and Murakoto channel their Genma power and strike the cave around them. While he initially doesn't understand what they're doing, he soon feels the cave begin to rumble around him and realizes that the two are attempting to bring the cave down on top of them. Garganto attempts to stop them, but tapping into and using his new power only further causes structural instability, and the walls and ceiling begin to collapse around them. With Sogen and Murakoto blocking the only exit, They, alongside Garaganto and the Oni ambushers, are soon caught in the cave-in and crushed to death, spelling the end for the legendary team. Saimyu just barely escapes with his life and goes into hiding, and the Oni, while annoyed that they lost a new pawn in Garaganto, are delighted that the other two fell with him, also assuming that Saimyu had died there as well. Saimyu keeps as low a profile as possible and documents his experiences, having already done so for his apprenticeship under Sogen and the betrayal of Garaganto, and finds himself witnessing a pact between the Oni and a human. As the human pledges their loyalty to the Oni, Saimyu watches as the Oni gauntlet materializes on their wrist, with what appears to be tendrils extending from it and wrapping around his arm. Disturbed by this sight, he manages to slip away undetected, but soon finds himself beginning to suffer from thirst and starvation after attempting to survive on water leaking through the walls. He eventually happens across the gate to the Genma world, but after going for a couple of days without enough food or water, he barely manages to complete another journal entry before falling unconscious. However, he is soon noticed by nearby Genma and is taken within the Genma world, only to be brought before Guildenstern, who begins operating on him in an attempt to save his life, especially knowing that he is Sogen's apprentice. Thankfully, Guildenstern would be quick to see the problem and be able to operate fast enough to save his life, and Saimyu would soon wake up on an operating table after a few hours. Naturally, Saimyu would be endlessly grateful towards Guildenstern for saving his life, but would also sorrowfully report the events at the Cave of Treachery, revealing Garaganto's betrayal and the death of all three warriors. Shocked at this revelation, it would soon be reported to Fortinbras, and while the God of Light would be angered at Garaganto's actions, he would at least be thankful that Sogen and Murakoto used their final moments to stop him from being let loose upon them. The Genma would soon construct a monument within the Genma world in memory of these warriors, though would omit Garaganto for his great treachery, and would have both Sogen and Murakoto's names recorded to ensure that their memories would never be forgotten. Unfortunately, word of these three deaths would spread and Genma and human morale would take a nosedive, though they would soon find that their misfortunes had only just begun. Emboldened by this victory, the Oni would successfully locate the Genma sacred place and launch an assault, hoping to gain access to their research. Luckily for the Genma, Gugan Dantis was assigned to protect this place, and both his outstanding skill and near impenetrable magic barrier allow him to slay whatever Oni is sent against him. On top of this, Dantes had been given his own legion of Genma soldiers to help reinforce the sacred place, a precaution taken since the Genma had recently managed to complete the construction of a massive battleship known as the Genbu, not wanting it to fall into the Oni's hands. While they trusted Dantes to defend the island, Claudius suggested that the battleship's power core be stored elsewhere, and given that the Oni had yet to locate it, the core was stored within the undersea temple. In the end, the Oni realised that they would never break through Dantes' valiant defence until they could break his personal barrier, and soon created the Oni flute in order to dispel it. However, when a second wave of Oni launched an attack with the flute in hand, Dantes and his forces successfully cut them down before they could use it, and continued to hold the sacred place. With the flute now in Genma hands and no way to break his shield, the Oni decided to take drastic measures and place a time lock on the sacred place, trapping Dantes and his forces within and ensuring that if the Oni couldn't utilise whatever was held there, then neither could their enemies. The fall of the sacred place and loss of Gugan Dantes dropped allied morale even further, and the triumvirate began to see the writing on the wall. Soon, Ophelia, who had been primarily spending the war as almost a frontline combat medic, would make the decision to go into hiding in order to slowly facilitate the return of the Genma and downfall of the Oni, anticipating that the Genma would be forced underground, or worse, rendered near extinct by the Oni. With her mastery over magic, Ophelia would give herself a human disguise and disappear. Not all was looking up for the Oni, however, as doubts began to rise within small sections of the Mino clan. Seeing not only the true cruelty of the Oni, But also feeling sick of being their pawns, a small group of Mino led by Mino Goro would decide that enough was enough and make plans to escape. Knowing that the Oni would kill them for daring to openly turn on them, these Mino renegades would discreetly begin to disappear, effectively faking their deaths as just more war casualties. Mino Goro would soon get in contact with Guildenstern, and with Fortinbras' permission, the scientists would agree to grant them sanctuary within the Genma world, and the Oni would soon believe them to have been individually hunted down by the Genma. As the war neared its end, the Oni would soon develop their most powerful weapon, the Bishaman Sword, and the Oni God of Darkness would wield this blade in a final brutal conflict against Fortinbras himself. Eventually, after a long struggle, Fortinbras would successfully destroy the God of Darkness, but the battle would leave him severely weakened, and the remaining 12 Oni gods would take advantage. Using as much power as they could, the Oni gods would create the Omen Star and seal the weakened Fortinbras' godly power within, soon sealing the star itself within the underworld. Now too weak to continue the fight themselves, the Oni and the Genma would be forced to make an uneasy truce, the Oni demanding that the Triumvirate be sealed away as well. The Genma, knowing that they would not be able to refuse without dooming their race, countered that the Genma as a whole must be allowed to survive and that the dreaded Bishaman Sword must be sealed away as well. To their surprise, the Oni gods agreed to these terms, but once the Bishaman Sword was sealed, the Oni were only successfully able to find and seal Claudius and Rosencrantz, Ophelia having already gone into hiding. It was soon determined that she had already died, but the Oni gods decided to perform one final cruel act on the Genma, using what power they had left to lay a curse upon all of Genma kind, transforming them into monsters, Fortinbras himself morphing into a massive white serpent. This act would cost the 12 Oni gods their physical forms, but they believed it to be a small price to pay for ensuring that the Genma would have no choice but to be forced underground. Humanity, upon seeing their new forms, quickly grew fearful of the Genma, and they were indeed forced to go into hiding, retreating en masse within the Genma world. With the Bishaman Sword also sealed within the Dark Realm, the Oni ordered their remaining warriors to assassinate what remained of the Mino clan to ensure that no one other than themselves could ever access and retrieve the blade. The Mino renegades within the Genma world would learn of this and deeply mourn the loss of their race, knowing that they are all that remains of the Mino, but soon vow to grant passage to the Dark Realm to someone in the future and turn the sword against its creators. The Oni, believing themselves to be the only ones capable of accessing the Dark Realm now, decide to await the reincarnation of the Black Oni and unseal the sword then in order to complete their conquest. In the meantime, with the Genma now unable to interact with humanity due to their new monstrous appearances, the Oni would begin their efforts to rewrite the Genma's history through rumours and whispers, eventually causing future generations of humans to view the Genma as evil monsters. They also decide to hunt for the missing Ophelia, suspecting that she survived the war, but she would be able to evade detection, and the Oni would eventually give up on their efforts, certain that she did in fact perish near the end of the war. Fortinbras would also be forced to remain isolated within the Genma world, and with Guildenstern as their remaining scientific expert, the former god would order him to research ways to break their curse. But no matter how long it took, the scientist would fail each and every time, eventually coming to the conclusion that the only way to break it would be to destroy the Oni themselves. He would want to know the location of Ophelia, knowing that she survived but not knowing where she had hidden, but Fortinbras had faith that she would be able to plant the seeds of their return as well. As the ages came and went, many of the Genma would slowly begin to devolve a little, eventually losing the ability to speak properly. Thankfully, they retain enough cognitive ability to understand their higher-ups and remain aware that humanity are not their enemies. Over the years, occasional humans would give in to their curiosity and make contact with the Genma in secret, and the Genma explain their true history and warn of the Oni's true nature. Many of these humans would not heed the Genma's words and dismiss them as lies, but there would be occasions where humans would actually believe them and attempt to spread this information to others. Unfortunately, nobody would ever believe them either, and the Oni would take notice of these whistleblowers, ordering the pawns they gain over time to have them silenced. As more learn the truth of the Oni and the Genma, they would eventually learn to be more careful with how they spread this information, deciding instead to silently document their discoveries and slowly seed them wherever they can. This frustrates the Oni, as they are often unable to trace these documents back to whoever wrote them, but remain convinced that it won't be enough to change everyone's perspective so easily. This eventually leads us to 1560, and the young Samanosuke Akechi watches over the Battle of Yamazaki, witnessing Nobunaga's victory and subsequent assassination before escaping the conflict. However, Nobunaga's body is recovered by the Oni, and he is soon resurrected, something the Oni have done in canon with Henri, and they offer to trade him their power for his servitude, an offer that he accepts. With Nobunaga now an Oni warrior, they order him to continue his conquest in order to widen the Oni's sphere of influence, and Nobunaga returns to his clan to resume his campaign. Having only just been revived, he returns to find his clan in a bit of disarray, so he spends time getting them back into shape, deciding not to challenge Yoshitatsu Saito just yet until the time is right. Since the Inabayama castle isn't under threat, Samanosuke returns later in the year alongside Kaede and reunites with his cousin Yuki. They end up meeting Yumemaru as a result, and since Yuki is already on good terms with Samanosuke, the two would have a much better start to their own relationship, with Samanosuke quickly becoming somewhat of a mentor to the boy. The next year, Yoshitatsu would die of illness, leading to Tatsuoki Saito to take his father's place as the head of the clan. Samanosuke would spend the next few years training Yumemaru, the boy hoping to become a warrior capable of protecting his adoptive sister. But with Tatsuoki being a far less effective leader than his late father, Nobunaga would take advantage and begin warring with the Saito clan. In 1565, Eke and Kokuji, along with his wife and daughter, would be invited to the Inabayama castle as a guest of the Saito clan, and he would remain there for the next year. Knowing his reputation, Samanosuke would build a respect for the spearman, even despite his enjoyment of alcohol. While he isn't quite as much of a drunk as canon since he isn't grieving the death of his family, he is still rather fond of a few good drinks. In 1566, following a multitude of Saito losses against the Oda clan, Samanosuke successfully convinces Tatsuoki to have Yuki and Yumemaru evacuated while they have the chance, and Yuki suggests talking to Sokyu Imai in Sakai for a safe haven. Eke also comes with them, hoping to also evacuate his wife and daughter, and Sokyu agrees to take them in. With all four non-combatants now safe, Samanosuke and Kaede attempt to finish Yumemaru's training, with Eke deciding to chip in as well. While this is happening, Nobunaga would arrange the marriage of his sister, Oichi, to Nagamasa Asai in order to create an alliance with the Asai clan. Once the marriage had been completed, Oichi would begin living within Odani Castle in Omi province, while Nobunaga continued his conquest in Mino. However, Oichi couldn't help but be confused that Nobunaga had insisted that a specific maid would go with her, Nobunaga insisting that it was the one thing he would not negotiate. This maid would remain very close to Oichi and Nagamasa, coming to know more about the two than most. Over the next year, Yumemaru's training starts bearing fruit, and he begins showing the makings of a powerful warrior. But by mid-September 1567, Nobunaga begins his assault on the Inabayama castle. This attack is noticed by the still hiding Genma, who realise that Nobunaga is the latest of the Oni's human servants, deciding this time to intervene in an attempt to stop him, knowing that such a capable warlord would be extremely destructive in the Oni's hands. Soon, rumours of not only the Oda assault, but also sightings of monsters near Inabayama reach the group in Sakai, and Yuki begs Samanosuke to go back to Mino province and save Tatsuoki, thinking that the monsters will end up killing him. He and Kaede agree to return, asking Eke to remain in order to keep Yuki, Yumemaru and his own family safe while they're gone. and they soon reach Inabayama and meet with a Saito guard, being told that Tatsuoki is currently holed up in the castle's keep. Samanosuke and Kaede decide to split up to reach him, with Samanosuke heading north to find a couple of Saito soldiers cowering from a pair of three eyes. Thinking that they are attacking, Samanosuke is quick to attack the two Genma himself, with the two barely able to react and dodge in time. He repeatedly swings at the two, but despite his aggression, they do nothing more than avoid his attacks, not once attempting to retaliate. Soon, knowing that he isn't going to stand down, the two Genma decide it best to flee, leaving Samanosuke to check on the two soldiers. The two thank him for saving them, also thinking that the monsters tried to attack them, though Samanosuke does notice that neither of them sport even a single wound from the encounter. Before he can ask what's happening, they are soon approached by a group of soldiers sporting the Oda banner, raising their blades at Samanosuke, who is forced to face them. However, they are all interrupted by an approaching rumble, the ground heaving as something massive makes its way towards them, the smoke soon clearing to reveal the hulking form of a now cursed Osric. Everyone present is immediately on edge at his appearance, including the Oda soldiers, but Osric soon looks down and fixes his gaze on them, swinging his massive club and instantly smashing them against the wall. With the Oda soldiers dealt with, he looks towards Samanosuke as he rushes the Genma, but Osric effortlessly blocks his attack. He tells the warrior that he cannot damage him, but Samanosuke tells the remaining Saito guards to retreat and protect Tatsuoki, telling Osric that he won't be killing anyone. Osric becomes a little annoyed and simply tells Samanosuke to move, asserting that his quarrel is with Nobunaga, but Samanosuke doesn't listen and continues trying to break through Osric's defences. Now sufficiently frustrated, Osric decides that he doesn't have time for this and decides to retaliate, landing a powerful enough swing to slam Samanosuke against the wall, though holding back enough to not actually kill him, saying that he should have listened as he stomps away. Samanosuke ends up falling unconscious from the blow and is soon visited by the Oni, deciding to try and manipulate Samanosuke into becoming their pawn, effectively telling him the same thing that they do in canon, though most of which are complete lies here. Upon being given an Oni gauntlet and ordered to destroy the monstrous Genma, Samanosuke soon wakes up and realises that the gauntlet is real, falling for the Oni's deception and vowing to destroy the Genma before they can kill anyone else. He soon makes his way to the forest road and reaches the underground chamber, albeit with far less resistance since the Genma are focusing on hindering Oda's forces this time, and he soon finds a document written by Sogen, one that warns of the dangers of the Oni gauntlet, as well as those who wear them. Samanosuke comes to believe that it refers to the potential of being overwhelmed by its power if overused, and decides to limit its usage to no more than absolutely necessary. He does soon find a shrine containing Shiden, an Oni orb lost during the Onin War, and gains ownership of Reizan before finding another journal. This turns out to be the first entry written by Saimyu, who Samanosuke learns was Sogen's apprentice, and he learns more of Sogen himself, reading that he had fought a monstrous evil alongside his allies during the Great War. Again, Samanosuke misunderstands this and assumes this great evil to be the Genma, thinking that they had made war against humanity and the Oni, especially after the latter had told him that the Genma had subverted them. After reading, he leaves the underground chamber and heads towards the keep. While he is about to enter right away, he notices the trail of Osric and decides instead to track and defeat him first, hoping to prevent the monster from killing anyone else. He finds the Genma in the moat and challenges him, Osric actually trying to talk him down at first, at least before noticing Samanosuke's Oni gauntlet. Seeing that Samanosuke is now an Oni warrior, his face contorts with a mixture of fear and anger, trying to warn Samanosuke that he had been taken in by the Oni's lies. Unsurprisingly, Samanosuke doesn't listen, calling Osric nothing more than an abominable monster as he attacks, Osric being given no choice but to actually fight back. Like canon, with the power of the Oni in Samanosuke's possession, Osric is unable to defend against his newfound strength and is left defeated, collapsing as he questions why the Genma tried so hard to defend such ungrateful humans. Still assuming that the Genma are just deceptive monsters, Samanosuke silences him and seals his soul, vowing to do the same for the rest. Making his way through the cave, he reaches Guildenstern and instantly prepares to fight him, and while Guildenstern feels a hint of fear upon seeing Samanosuke's gauntlet, he calmly introduces himself and asks for Samanosuke's name, the warrior tentatively giving it. Guildenstern asks Samanosuke if he has come to assassinate him, but Samanosuke insists that he is here to protect Tatsuoki from the Genma, but Guildenstern says that they are here for the same reason. Samanosuke is confused by this, and Guildenstern warns that whatever he had been told by the Oni was false, revealing to him the true origins of their conflict, including the Onin War and the fact that humans and Genma once coexisted long ago. Samanosuke refuses to believe the word of monsters, but Guildenstern tells him that they weren't always like this, telling of the Oni curse that transformed them into abominations after the war ended, having once been extremely similar in appearance to humans. Unfortunately, Samanosuke is still unwilling to believe him, citing that he had already been attacked by Osric, causing Guildenstern to work out that Osric was now likely dead, lamenting that his mission was to focus solely on stopping the Oda clan and not to kill anyone else. He takes a moment of silence in respect to his fallen ally, but Samanosuke is unmoved and prepares to attack. Guildenstern, upon seeing that Samanosuke cannot be reasoned with, gives a final warning that anything promised by the Oni is a lie, leaving a journal on the table and asking him to read it as he warps away. While rather hesitant, still not wanting to put any trust in Guildenstern's words, Samanosuke eventually decides to read the journal, realizing that it's Saimu's, reading to discover Garganto's betrayal in the Cave of Treachery, as well as the Oni ambush that left Saimu as the only survivor. Despite this journal outright confirming that the Oni were deceivers, Samanosuke is not yet convinced and simply believes it to be another case of Genma deception, leaving the cave to ascend the keep. Since the Genma aren't actually antagonists here, they aren't using any door seals, so while Samanosuke does not obtain Enryu since Kuen was not stored in Guildenstern's lab, he doesn't actually need it this time around. Inside the keep, he encounters a number of Oda and Genma soldiers fighting each other, while some remaining Saito soldiers attempt to flee, one seeing Samanosuke and calling out to him for help against both. Without hesitation, Samanosuke cleaves through both the Oda and the Genma, though the Oda do notice that Samanosuke is wearing the same gauntlet as Nobunaga, but are each slain before they have a chance to question him. The surviving Saito soldiers thank him and tell that very soon after the Oda clan arrived, the Genma had also appeared, and the two began fighting each other, which gave them a chance to escape. Samanosuke is quick to ask after Tatsuoki, and they tell him that he is currently holed up at the top of the keep, though warned that more Oda soldiers were seen heading up there too. He tells them to head up there and keep Tatsuoki safe, but as he is about to follow them, Samanosuke encounters Tokichiro doing the same, the latter quick to question if he's working for the Saito clan before realizing who Samanosuke is. He introduces himself like normal, and Samanosuke instantly orders him to call his men back, but Tokichiro responds by offering Samanosuke a job with the Oda clan, noting that he and Nobunaga already share the same power as he points to Samanosuke's gauntlet. Samanosuke, while outwardly snapping that he serves no one, inwardly questions why the Oni would give Nobunaga their power as well. Tokichiro asks him why he's helping the Saito clan, asserting that the Oda clan are the best chance they have at defeating the Genma, but Samanosuke simply says that his reasons are his own and raises his blade, ordering Tokichiro again to call off his forces. Annoyed, Tokichiro leaves, promising that he isn't giving up just yet. Samanosuke ascends to the upper floors and is soon found by Kaede, who reports even more fighting between monsters and the Oda soldiers throughout the castle. More than that, she notes that the Genma seem to be focused solely on the Oda clan even when she found Genma alone with any Saito soldiers, simply ignoring them and giving them a chance to retreat. Samanosuke begins to feel a little conflicted, and Kaede notices, asking him what's wrong. Samanosuke tells of his meeting with Guildenstern, mentioning everything that the scientist had told him, unsure if he believes what he learned about the Genma's history. Kaede agrees that something is definitely off about this and gives him another journal, telling Samanosuke that she found it in the castle. He realises that it's Saimu's third entry, showing Kaede the first two that he'd found, the second having been given to him by Guildenstern himself. While Kaede reads over the first two, Samanosuke reads the third to find that it describes Saimu's witnessing of a human making a pact with the Oni, noting how disturbed he was at witnessing the gauntlet's tendrils wrap around the human's arm. Kaede is quick to ask if it's the same gauntlet he's wearing, and Samanosuke confirms, telling of his own encounter with the Oni. Having learned this much, however, the two finally begin to express doubts about the entire situation, but are unsure of what their next move should be. Before they can figure something out, the keep's traps are sprung and the two are forced to disarm them, Kaede successfully disarming the water trap before Samanosuke drowns. Following this, the two agree to split up and search for more clues, and Samanosuke heads upstairs to find a lone Three Eyes, drawing his weapon. However, the Three Eyes once again does not attack him, simply keeping its eye on him until it flees once it notices the sound of Tokichiro approaching, Samanosuke swinging at it and missing as it jumps from the castle. Tokichiro notices this and again offers for Samanosuke to join the Oda clan, but Samanosuke just shouts at him to move as he tries to rush towards Tatsuoki, stopping when Tokichiro tells him that it's too late for the Lord. He warns Samanosuke that since Nobunaga will soon rule the world with the Oni, he should choose his side very carefully, Samanosuke questioning why the Oni would want to rule. Tokichiro tells him that the Oni will allow them to root out and destroy the Genma and make humanity the dominant species, asserting that the Oni's power allows the strong to prey upon the weak. As Samanosuke begins to get angry at Tokichiro's ramblings, the retainer tells that once Tatsuoki is slain and the Saito clan destroyed, the Oda clan will begin a total conquest of the country until they finally reign supreme. Samanosuke finally takes a swing at Tokichiro, but the retainer escapes from the castle, promising that his decision to side with the Saito clan would have dire consequences. Samanosuke rushes to the top of the castle to find the majority of the castle guard alongside Tatsuoki, telling the young lord that Yuki had sent him to help. Tatsuoki angrily tells him that he should have been here long ago, but Samanosuke insists that he's here simply as a favour to Yuki, not a servant of the Saito clan. Tatsuoki decides that the details don't matter and orders him to help deal with both Nobunaga and the monsters, but soon notices the gauntlet on his wrist and grows in rage, identifying it as the same gauntlet seen on Nobunaga's wrist and accusing him of treachery. Samanosuke is quick to deny this, and many of Tatsuoki's men end up backing him up as well, telling the Lord that he had saved them from both the Oda clan and the Genma. Before Tatsuoki has the chance to keep arguing, Kaede rushes in and tells everyone that the Genma have increased in numbers and the Oda clan had been driven towards the western prison. Tatsuoki begins boasting that clearly his forces are too much for them, but Kaede disagrees, mentioning that not only are the Genma continuing to ignore any Saito forces, but that she witnessed a number of moments where they would attack Genma themselves in a fit of panic, only for the Genma to block or parry their attacks and move on, never once striking them back. While Tatsuoki refuses to listen, Samanosuke and Kaede decide to head to the west to investigate, telling the guards to remain here and focus on protecting Tatsuoki. Having been given the key to the western prison by another Saito guardsman, Kaede is able to unlock the door and get them inside, seeing more instances of Genma attacking the Oda clan. While Samanosuke instinctively prepares to attack, Kaede tells him to wait and watch for a moment, wanting him to see up close the Genma's strangely selective aggression. While many Saito soldiers are seen already slain, one survivor finds himself cowering as a zombie warrior successfully cuts down an Oda soldier, turning towards the guardsman for a moment before shifting its focus to the rest of the Oda clan, joining the rest of the present Genma as they push the Oda clan back. The guardsman notices Samanosuke and Kaede and rushes towards them, and they tell him to head to the keep to help protect Tatsuoki. Now feeling even more doubt about the situation, the two decide to actually sidestep the fight rather than join it, heading further in to find a Baguwasha as it's about to swing its axe through another group of Oda soldiers. As it cleaves through them, it turns around to notice Samanosuke and Kaede, and while it initially doesn't react, it zeroes its focus on Samanosuke's gauntlet and grips its axe, expecting the warrior to fight. Both sides remain on edge and begin to slowly circle each other, neither sure who will make the first move, but in a moment of quick thinking, Kaede suddenly shouts that they are not allies of Nobunaga. The Baguwasha suddenly stops upon hearing this, and shifts its focus to Kaede, who after another tense few seconds of silence repeats herself, saying that they are here to stop Nobunaga. The Bagawasha takes a moment to look at the two and begins to relax, lowering its axe, and it slowly turns away from them and leaves to a Genma portal. The two are left in shock that actually worked, and Samanosuke finally admits after this final interaction that he can't ignore the signs anymore, deciding to head back to the moat in an attempt to find Guildenstern and gain some answers. The two reach the lab to find it empty, and begin searching through to find anything that will give them some answers, though to no avail. Samanosuke asks Kaede to scout around for more info, but as she turns to leave the lab, she sees that a woman had just entered the room, Samanosuke also turning to notice her. They ask her who she is, and she identifies herself as Nui, a servant of Princess Saigo of Mikawa province, revealing that she had been asked to give aid to the Saito clan. The two are stunned by this, but Nui notices Samanosuke's gauntlet and calls attention to it, telling him that he wields a dangerous power. This only further shocks Samanosuke as he asks how much she actually knows about it, and she tells him that the knowledge had been passed down through the Saigo family, warning that the power of the Oni would cost him his humanity. Samanosuke asks what she knows about the Genma, and she says that their history had been rewritten by the Oni following a long and bitter war. Beginning to have her own suspicions, Kaede asks her outright if she is an ally to the Genma, and Nui hesitates to answer, not wanting to risk making them enemies. Seeing this, Samanosuke tells her that he wants to know the truth, promising to decide his allegiance only once he knows all that he needs. Nui relaxes a bit upon hearing this and agrees to tell them, approaching the stone table and triggering it to begin descending, asking the two to join her. The lift brings them to an underground sanctum, and Nui leads them to the gate to the Genma world, identifying it as such and telling them that it is only accessible by the Genma and their most trusted allies. The two notice a magic barrier blocking the entrance, but Nui suddenly uses her magic to dispel the barrier and open the door, telling them that they will find Guildenstern inside. Shocked as they are by what they're seeing, the two are led inside to find Guildenstern, the scientists glad that they are beginning to see the patterns of Oni deception. They both remain on edge, especially Kaede, and Samanosuke demands to know why the Genma came here and what they even are. Guildenstern tells them that the Oni had appeared on Earth around 2,000 years ago, and made war with both humanity and the Genma in an attempt to conquer the world, led by the Oni god of darkness against their own god of light. In the end, while the Oni god was destroyed, Fortinbras' godly power was sealed away, leading to both sides being forced to come to a truce. As one final act of cruelty, the 12 minor Oni gods laid a curse on the Genma and transformed them into monsters, forcing them to go into hiding as humanity grew to fear their new appearances. Following this, the Oni took advantage of their isolation and spread falsehoods about the Genma, causing humanity to believe that they were always monsters and make them more likely to side with the Oni. He asks if Samanosuke had read the journal that he left for him, and Samanosuke confirms, also mentioning that they had found 2 more of his entries and asking who Saimu and Sogen really were. Guildenstern explains the history of Saimu, Sogen, and the legendary team that the latter was a part of, including the betrayal of one of their own. When Kaede asks the nature of this betrayal, Guildenstern tells them of Garganto's secret pact with the Oni, leading to him setting up a trap for them in the Cave of Treachery and forcing them to collapse the cave on top of them all, leaving Saimu as the only survivor. He then gives Samanosuke one final journal entry, and Samanosuke reads it to find that Saimu was barely clinging to life when he found the gate to the Genma world, hoping that someone would find his journals and learn what happened to his master. Kaede asks what happened to him, and Guildenstern recounts being brought his unconscious body by a group of passing Genma, taking and operating on him to save his life, noting that if he had arrived any later, then he and the knowledge of what truly happened would have most certainly died. He soon asks the two to follow him, and they are led deeper within the Genma world to a statue of 2 warriors, telling them that this monument was constructed in their memory after having learnt what truly happened. Kaede soon notices a plaque at the foot of the statue, reading the engraving, "In memory of Sogen Osho and Murakoto. May their memory and actions never be forgotten." After a moment of silence, Samanosuke and Kaede both look up to notice both Guildenstern and Nui lowering their heads, realizing that the two were paying their respects, or perhaps even mourning. After a deep breath, Guildenstern proclaims that those two were the greatest of humanity, and a constant reminder of why the Genma wish to see humans freed from the Oni's grip. Samanosuke, unable to deny that Guildenstern's words are truly genuine, finally accepts that siding with the Oni was a mistake, and a sudden wave of guilt hits him as he realises that Osric had died because he was unwilling to listen. The more he looks back with a more open perspective, the more he realises that Osric had only ever fought him in self-defence, repeatedly trying to talk Samanosuke down until finally deciding that there was no other choice. Both Guildenstern and Nui, while clearly mourning Osric's death, find themselves unable to place the blame on Samanosuke, instead blaming the Oni for deceiving him. Realising that she hasn't really said much this whole time, Kaede turns to Nui and questions what connection she has with the Genma, and she says that a select few Genma were proficient in illusion-based magic, using it to create for themselves a more human disguise. She tells them that she had taken human form in order to integrate into human society without Oni detection, in order to keep the Genma updated on current events, asking the two to step back as she sheds her disguise and reveals herself as Hakuba. Seeing her morph into a large insect-like monster leaves them shocked and a little intimidated, but she soon reverts back to her human disguise and assumes that they understand now why she remains hidden. When asked if anyone else knows her true nature, she tells them that she had long integrated into the Saigo family and seeded the truth of the Genma there, them being one of the few people who know the Genma's real history. As Samanosuke is about to ask something else, a Three Eyes suddenly rushes in with an unconscious human, a surprised Hakuba asking who this is. The Three Eyes, through a combination of hisses and growls, attempts to explain since it's among those who have lost the ability to speak properly. Guildenstern and Hakuba are thankfully able to translate for them, saying that this human was found injured after fighting off a large number of Oda soldiers. As Samanosuke and Kaede take a closer look, however, they are horrified to realise that it is a 19-year-old Yumimaru, seeing that his wounds could be enough for him to bleed out before long. Surprised that they know him, Guildenstern is quick to take him to an operating table and begin treating his wounds, learning from the Three Eyes that he had been seen cutting down both Oda and Genma forces. While everyone is rather unhappy that he targeted the Genma as well, no one is really that surprised as Hakuba wishes that they find a way to break their curse soon, while Guildenstern begins to marvel at the number of wounds that Yumimaru had endured, noting that he must have faced more opponents before collapsing than they thought. Samanosuke and Kaede explain that they had been training him for the past 7 years, wanting to become strong enough to protect Yuki, and Guildenstern concedes that learning from them explains how he was able to survive for so long, acknowledging Samanosuke's extremely high skill level. He soon finishes the procedure and manages to stabilise him, determining that he had collapsed due to a mixture of exhaustion and blood loss, and the two thank the Genma for saving his life. While Samanosuke and Kaede want to wait for him to wake up, Guildenstern and Hakuba decide to report the events to Fortinbras. The two humans check Yumimaru's wounds themselves, shocked that he had survived against so many, and while Kaede muses if Yuki had asked him to come here, Samanosuke disagrees, telling of the bond that they had built during his training. He suspects that he came here against their wishes to help them, and Kaede can't help but laugh a little, suggesting that he and Yumimaru are becoming more alike, something that Samanosuke can't help but also chuckle at. The Genma soon return and check him again, making sure he remains stable, and they begin to discuss their plans going forward, but the sound of the conversation causes Yumimaru to slowly stir awake. They are quick to notice and rush to his side, and while Yumimaru is happy to see his teachers, He begins to go into a panic when he sees Guildenstern, Samanosuke and Kaede trying to calm him down. Samanosuke is quick to assure that he is safe here, and that Guildenstern is the one who saved his life, but this only confuses Yumemaru, asking them why they're here with a monster. They explain to him the truth about the Genma and tell him that they forged an alliance in order to stop the Oda clan, soon asking him why he came. Yumemaru expresses his inability to stay back while they fight on their own, wanting to stand by his master, and Kaede gives a knowing smirk to Samanosuke. While Samanosuke chastises him for putting himself at risk, he also concedes that Yumemaru has clearly become quite strong, promising to finish his training once this is all over. Suddenly, an explosion is heard from outside the Genma gate, and a dark spider rushes in and frantically hisses at them, Hekuba translating that a large blast had been seen from the top of the castle. The humans panic as they realise that that was where Tatsuoki was staying, but as Hekuba learns from the dark spider that Nobunaga has arrived at the castle himself, Guildenstern is suddenly called back by Fortinbras and rushes to see what the former god wants. While Samanosuke and Kaede promise to defeat Nobunaga, Hekuba warns that he is a far greater threat as an Oni warrior, lamenting that the Genma would have a slim chance if they faced him themselves. As the two are about to rush off and confront Nobunaga, Guildenstern re-enters and asks Kaede to remain in the Genma world for a little longer, promising that she can join Samanosuke soon and asking him to hurry and stop the warlord. While Kaede wants to join Samanosuke, the latter actually agrees since she doesn't have a similar power to match Nobunaga's Oni power, asking Guildenstern to keep her and Yumemaru safe as he rushes off. While Hekuba leads him out, Guildenstern turns to Kaede and says that their lord had told him to give her something just in case. Samanosuke leaves the moat to find most of the castle in flames, and he rushes up to the top of the keep to find the top room completely destroyed, with Nobunaga standing atop a dead Tatsuoki and his guards. Nobunaga turns to see Samanosuke, and noticing the Oni gauntlet on his wrist, assumes that Tokichiro had succeeded in recruiting him, but Samanosuke instantly draws Reizan and vows to make Nobunaga pay for Tatsuoki's death. Annoyed, Nobunaga questions why Samanosuke is raising his blade against a fellow Oni, but Samanosuke says that he is an Oni no longer, calling out their deception and labelling them the real monsters. Seeing that recruiting Samanosuke is a lost cause, Nobunaga warns that the power he has makes him stronger than ever, but Samanosuke doesn't back down and proclaims that his conquest ends here. Nobunaga, with a smirk, meets Samanosuke's challenge and begins producing his own Oni weapon, revealing himself to have been gifted Enryu, and he tells Samanosuke that his betrayal of the Oni is punishable by death. Nobunaga is the first to go on the offensive, shocking Samanosuke with his power as he is forced into the defensive, but it doesn't take long for him to realise that Enryu's larger size puts more emphasis on slower and more powerful strikes. Knowing this, Samanosuke begins prioritising speed to outmaneuver his opponent and counterattack, but as he begins closing the gap, Nobunaga begins to lose his temper and utilises Enryu's fire magic, Samanosuke barely able to avoid his flames. Now having to remain aware of Nobunaga's magic, he's forced to focus more on defense again to avoid the risk of rushing into more fire, and Nobunaga takes advantage of this hesitation, soon landing a powerful strike and breaking Samanosuke's guard, opening him up for a final blow. As he is about to take the swing, he is suddenly slashed from behind and knocked off balance, turning and retaliating against whatever attacked him, only for his new opponent to nimbly dodge out of the way. This new foe turns out to be Kaede, now sporting two bright yellow daggers as she dodges to Samanosuke's side and reveals that she had been granted Genma power by Guildenstern in order to aid in defeating Nobunaga. This only further builds Nobunaga's fury as he attempts to fight back, but with a now strengthened Kaede backing Samanosuke up, their teamwork quickly shifts the battle in their favour, with Kaede's speed keeping the warlord off balance and giving Samanosuke the chance to strike during these moments of vulnerability. Soon, after attempting to use his magic once again in a moment of anger, Kaede is able to zip around behind him and strike his leg, knocking him off balance again and allowing Samanosuke to thrust his blade into the warlord's chest. Nobunaga attempts to keep fighting, not willing to let his conquest end so unceremoniously, but Samanosuke retracts his blade from its target and watches as Nobunaga collapses dead at their feet. With the castle still in flames, Samanosuke encourages them to escape, but Kaede tells him that they need to take Nobunaga's gauntlet first, asking for him to help pry it off the dead warlord's wrist. After a bit of struggle, the two are able to break the grip of the gauntlet's tendrils and yank the gauntlet from Nobunaga before escaping the burning castle, leaving his body to be reduced to ash. As the castle begins to collapse, the two are able to escape, finding a small few remaining Saito soldiers and leading them out as well, with them quick to lay the blame for the destruction of Inabayama at the feet of both the Oda clan and the Genma. The two are quick to correct them, telling them that the Genma were actually trying to help fight back against the Oda clan, though the Saito guards are not easily convinced. Hoping to prove their claim, Kaede channels her new power, telling them that it is of Genma origin, while also informing of Yumemaru's near-death experience and survival thanks to Guildenstern. Since Yumemaru's been around for at least the past 7 years, if not a bit longer, the clan is fully aware of Yumemaru and ask where he is, and the two take them to the moat where they find a disguised Hekubo with Yumemaru, the latter now having recovered enough to walk. The soldiers are quick to check on him and question what happened, and he confirmed that the Genma had saved his life, having spent a bit of time talking with Hekuba and Guildenstern and becoming more accepting of their true history. As he does this, Guildenstern emerges from the cave, causing the guards to go quite a bit on edge, but Samanosuke and Kaede do their best to calm them down, assuring that Guildenstern is not an enemy. The scientist congratulates their efforts, calling it their first true victory against the Oni in over 1,000 years, turning to Kaede and asking if she has it. Kaede confirms and they hand Guildenstern Nobunaga's gauntlet, and Guildenstern is rather shocked to find the Oni orb Kuen within, realising that Nobunaga was an even greater threat than he thought. Now even more thankful that Nobunaga is no longer a threat, he promises to begin studying the gauntlet in the hopes of one day understanding the Oni's power, and perhaps develop either a countermeasure or even a gauntlet of their own. Samanosuke soon raises his concerns about his own gauntlet, worried that its influence could have an effect on him, and Guildenstern agrees that it's a credible concern and helps remove it, happy to have both 2 gauntlets and 2 Oni orbs to research, hoping that it will speed up the process. Given that Samanosuke, now without his own Oni power, is actually now weaker than Kaede at this point, Guildenstern promises that if he is able to develop a way to harness magic in a similar way to the Oni, Samanosuke will be the first to wield it. Satisfied that the job is done, the humans are all about to leave, but Guildenstern requests that Samanosuke and Kaede remain for a moment, telling them that the Genma Lord had asked to speak with them personally. Agreeing to meet him, Samanosuke tells the soldiers to escort Yumemaru back to Sakai, promising to return soon themselves and telling them to remember that the Oni can never be trusted. Once they and Yumemaru leave, Guildenstern and Hekuba escort the two into the demon world, speaking once again about the curse that the Oni had laid on them as they walked. They tell them that Fortinbras himself suffered the most drastic change of them all, so much so that he is now permanently confined within the Genma world until the curse can be broken. The two wonder how bad the change must have been to necessitate such a measure, but as they reach the inner sanctum, Guildenstern calls out to the Genma Lord, and the two humans stand in shock and horror as a massive white serpent emerges before them, immediately understanding why he is unable to leave. Upon seeing them, Fortinbras greets the two and is quick to praise their efforts against the Oni, formally introducing himself as the King of the Genma. He apologises for his clearly intimidating appearance, telling that while he was once the god of light, he had lost his godly power and been cursed to remain in the form of a monstrous serpent. Guildenstern soon informs Fortinbras of Nobunaga's defeat and presents the late warlord's gauntlet, and Fortinbras' mood instantly lifts, grateful that there are humans willing to aid them once again. Samanosuke, still thinking that Fortinbras is highly powerful even in this form, asks how he fell despite being a god, and Fortinbras says that the Oni god of darkness was of a similar strength, especially considering the weapon he was wielding. He tells of a most terrifying weapon that the Oni had managed to create, one so powerful that it had to be sealed away by the Oni themselves after the war. It was this weapon that almost spelt the end for Fortinbras, and the reason that he was left so weakened after the God of Darkness's defeat, leaving him vulnerable enough for the 12 minor Oni gods to extract and seal his godly power away and render him just as susceptible to their curse, though this final act had cost the Oni gods their physical forms. He suggests that they are now lying in wait for the God of Darkness to reincarnate as the Black Oni, waiting for him to reawaken so that they may complete their conquest unopposed, though he is unsure when and where the Black Oni will appear. Fortinbras stresses to them the need for preparation for the Oni's retaliation, not only for Nobunaga's defeat, but also Samanosuke's betrayal, telling Guildenstern to give Samanosuke the Genma's power. Latching on to the knowledge of the Oni's dangerous weapon, Kaede asks where it was sealed, and Fortinbras calls forth Mino Goro, introducing him as one of the last surviving members of the Mino clan and explaining their history. Samanosuke and Kaede are horrified upon learning of the Oni's genocide of the Mino in an attempt to ensure that no one but themselves have access to the Dark Realm, also learning that their ultimate weapon, the Bishaman Sword, was sealed there. Both the Genma and the remaining Mino had bided their time, waiting for the perfect chance to retrieve the blade themselves in order to keep it out of Oni hands, but were unable to risk entering for fear of the Oni noticing. The two also learn of the nature of the Dark Realm itself, being told that it acts as a dimensional prison for defeated Genma, as well as the fact that the Mino are the only entities outside of the Oni currently capable of opening passage to it. Naturally, Fortinbras asks the two to keep this knowledge hidden to ensure that the Oni don't learn of the surviving Mino, even from their own allies, to which the two agree, able to see the risk if the information did somehow leak. With this, Fortinbras thanks the two once again and wishes them luck, retreating back into his personal chamber, and Guildenstern takes them back to his lab to give Samanosuke their power. Much like Kaede, Samanosuke ends up gaining his own Genma weapon as well, a katana with a bright red glow, and once he becomes a fully fledged Genma warrior like Kaede, Guildenstern asks the two to maintain open contact in order for them to work together when the Oni inevitably play their hand once again. The two agree and bid both Guildenstern and Hakuba farewell, though Hakuba promises to try and gain aid in the future should they need it, the two thanking her as they leave. After catching up with Yumemaru and the remaining Saito guard, they all return to Sakai and reach Sokyu's residence, Yuki having been clearly in a panic from Yumemaru's departure as she rushes to him when she sees him. While grateful beyond words that he survived, she's quick to start yelling at him for putting himself at risk like that, especially after learning the severity of his wounds. Samanosuke and Kaede begin to explain the events, revealing that the monsters that appeared were actually their allies, much to the bewilderment of both Yuki and Sokyu. But Yumemaru and the Saito guards all corroborate their claims, including the fact that the Genma had actually saved Yumemaru's life. While Sokyu is a bit on the fence, Yuki is quick to believe them, not only because of how many are supporting these claims, but also knowing Samanosuke and Yumemaru more than long enough to know that they are no liars. Sokyu decides to trust their judgment and believes them as well, and with the Inabayama castle now in ruins, agrees to let them remain in his residence for the foreseeable future, simply happy that she and Yumemaru are both safe. Since Samanosuke no longer possesses any Oni power, he has no reason to go into hiding like he does in canon, instead staying in Sakai alongside Kaede in order to complete Yumemaru's training while also taking the time to get used to their new Genma power. Upon learning of the events at Inabayama, the Oni are left outraged, not only at Nobunaga's failure and death, but also Samanosuke's betrayal, particularly furious at Guildenstern for meddling so thoroughly in their affairs that Samanosuke learned the truth. Since Nobunaga's body was crushed and burnt in the rubble of Inabayama, they are unable to recover his body and resurrect him, leaving them no choice but to seek out someone else to do their bidding. As for the Oda clan, upon learning of the death of Nobunaga, the question of succession soon becomes a small point of contention. His half-brother, Nobuhiro Oda, would attempt to stake his claim as the new leader of the clan, but Tokichiro is able to rally almost the entire clan around Nobunaga's son, Nobutada, and Nobuhiro is soon executed for his attempts at seizing power from his nephew. Over the next few years, Nobutada would begin learning the art of war from Tokichiro, quickly gaining a formidable knowledge for military tactics. The death of Nobunaga at Inabayama ends up rocking the entire country, and once learning of Tatsuoki's death alongside him, much of the Saito clan's remaining forces that survived the attack would find Samanosuke in Sakai the following year and pledge their fealty to him, knowing his own role in Nobunaga's downfall. Having known his previous involvement with the Saito clan, as well as his close connection with both Yuki and Yumemaru, they are quick to believe him the best candidate, asking him to lead the clan since Tatsuoki had no male heirs to succeed him. While Samanosuke isn't too fond of the idea, Yuki and Kaede both actually support it, saying that under his lead, he could be able to have an entire clan to aid in the fight against the Oni. Guildenstern, having begun to make occasional visits over the past year, also supports the idea, hoping that if the Saito clan as a whole learn the truth about the Oni and Genma, then it could spark a chain reaction that spreads the knowledge across the country and deprive the Oni of potential allies. Eke, having spent enough time with Samanosuke as they trained Yumemaru, is also supportive of this idea, having gained a great respect for Samanosuke by now. With everyone, including Kaede, Yuki and Yumemaru, encouraging the idea, believing Samanosuke to make a good leader, he asks them to give him some time to think it over, at which point he actually decides to contact his uncle Mitsuhide for advice. Once the two meet, Samanosuke reveals the events of Inabayama, including the truth of the Genma, demonstrating his new Genma power as proof, and Mitsuhide is baffled, though has no reason to distrust Samanosuke and trusts his word. Once he learns of the chance for Samanosuke to become the new head of the Saito clan, Mitsuhide also encourages the idea, confident that he would be a good leader, but Samanosuke stresses that he has no desire for conquest. Mitsuhide, however, simply tells him that he doesn't have to, instead telling him that all he needs to be is a leader for those who need it. With this in mind, after thinking things over, Samanosuke returns and gives the Saito clan a condition to his ascension. He would only accept the role under the stipulation that Yumemaru would take his place once he's ready, promising to help him learn all of the necessary qualities of being a good leader. Everyone is on board with the idea and accepts, and Samanosuke would soon become the interim head of the Saito clan, his name temporarily changing to Hidemitsu Samanosuke Saito. As his first action as leader, he ensures that the entire clan learn and understand the truth about both the Oni and Genma, hoping to prepare the entire clan for whenever the Oni make their next move. Guildenstern reports this turn of events to Fortinbras, and the former god is highly pleased that the Genma have gained the allegiance of the entire clan, growing hopeful that it could lead to their resurgence. Over the next year, the Saito clan would come to understand the Genma, something made significantly easier once they learn of Yumemaru's survival at their hands. As the Saito clan slowly begin to replenish their numbers, they soon decide to relocate back to Mino province and begin the process of rebuilding the Inabayama castle, other clans never taking the opportunity due to the rumours of monsters nearby. Nobunaga's death also prevented any subsequent attempts by the Oda clan to take the castle themselves, and with the help of the Genma, the Saito clan would rebuild and reoccupy the castle by early 1570. By now, Eke and his family decide to stay with the Saito clan, Samanosuke promising that the castle will remain a safe haven for his family, especially with the Genma now aiding in its protection. Throughout these past couple of years, Guildenstern would work tirelessly to study and understand the Oni gauntlets, and he would soon make a small breakthrough not long after Inabayama is fully rebuilt. While not yet able to harness power similar to the Oni just yet, he does succeed in being able to access the souls of Genma sealed within the gauntlets themselves, and begins working to free them and restore them to life. This would include Osric, who upon his resurrection would learn of events following his initial defeat, including Samanosuke's choice to ally himself with the Genma. Osric, still bitter about his death, remains angry at Samanosuke, but while he argues with Guildenstern, Fortinbras would personally intervene, reminding Osric that the Oni had spread their deception throughout humanity for the past 1,000 years. Stressing that the Oni are at fault instead of Samanosuke, Osric is eventually convinced to forgive Samanosuke, though reasons that he will only do so if Samanosuke himself shows genuine remorse. Guildenstern notifies Samanosuke of Osric's revival, and the latter is quick to visit the Genma world to face Osric and apologise, still feeling significant guilt for his unwillingness to listen to him. Able to see the genuine shame in Samanosuke's eyes, Osric decides to challenge him to a rematch, and while Samanosuke is reluctant, Guildenstern actually asks him to accept, able to see what Osric is trying to do. In the end, Samanosuke accepts Osric's challenge, hoping to atone for their previous conflict. Now knowing of Samanosuke's skill despite no longer having Oni power, Osric actually attempts to fight much more mindfully instead of mindlessly flailing, Samanosuke noticing and focusing on outmaneuvering his opponent. The Genma does prove much more capable of keeping up with Samanosuke, especially given that his Genma power doesn't strengthen him as much as his now lost Oni power, but Samanosuke's skill is still enough for him to overcome Osric, managing to disarm and subdue him. Seeing now Samanosuke's conviction during their battle, Osric finds it within himself to forgive him, though promises to defeat him in the future. Samanosuke, seeing this as a way to keep both of their skills sharp, welcomes Osric's challenge, and the two shake hands as they begin a more friendly rivalry. Over the next 3 years, Samanosuke, Eke, and Kaede continue to eventually finish Yumimaru's training, the now 25-year-old man growing into an extremely powerful warrior, especially when the likes of Osric begins contributing to his improvement. Unfortunately, Yumimaru is not the only person whose training results in exceptional results. By 1573, Nobutada grows into a highly effective commander thanks to learning from Tokichiro, and after already having spent 10 years with his father, he and Tokichiro both agree to follow in Nobunaga's footsteps. The two soon decide to make contact with the Oni clan in the hopes of exacting vengeance on Samanosuke, and with the Oni sharing this desire, they agree to trade their power for servitude, making Nobutada and Tokichiro Oni warriors. Even worse, the two would both gain their own Oni weapons, with Nobutada gaining Boraito and Tokichiro obtaining Shippu. With two new servants, the Oni are quick to begin giving them orders, telling them to launch an attack on the Yagyu clan in Yamato province, knowing of their age-old connection to the Genma. The Oda soon launch their attack, beginning their massacre of the Yagyu, and while they are actually able to kill a small number of their attackers due to them only being human, the attack still results in the total destruction of the village. Like normal, word of the attack reaches Jubei and he rushes back, killing the few remaining soldiers when he returns and following a voice as it leads him to a hidden spring. Upon arriving, he is soon confronted by a woman as she materializes in front of him, a warm smile on her face. He questions her identity, but she dodges the question and tells him that the village was attacked by Nobutada Oda, warning that he and his retainer, Tokichiro Kinoshita, had gained the power of the Oni following the death of Nobunaga. Jubei is left confused, questioning what she means, and she tells him that the Oni had been at war with humanity and the Genma for millennia, detailing their history of conquest and manipulation. Now lowering her head, she then tells of the curse that the Oni had laid upon the Genma, channeling her magic and reverting to her true Genma form, revealing herself as Ophelia, showing what the Oni had done to them. Her true form instantly puts Jubei on edge, but Ophelia reveals that she had learnt to use her magic to hide her true form in order to remain undetected after the Onin War. At some point, she had met a human and instantly fell in love, eventually revealing her true nature to him, though he remained understanding, and the two would soon have a child. This child, much to Jubei's shock, is revealed to be himself, Ophelia identifying herself as his mother, happy that she finally has the chance to meet him. While he is unsure what to say, she tells him that being a human Genma hybrid means that he is able to naturally harness Genma power, telling him to use it to defeat both Nobutada and the Oni. It's here that Jubei suddenly begins remembering very small but strange differences on his body compared to those around him, particularly some of his skin seeming to be more scaly and discoloured, and realising that this may well be due to his Genma heritage. As the realisation begins to hit him, his innate Genma power suddenly begins to manifest, and his katana soon morphs into a bright blue Genma blade, though Ophelia warns that the Oni's magic has proven to overwhelm their own in some cases. She warns him to be careful when facing an Oni warrior, telling him that he can recognise one by a gauntlet on their wrist. With his power now accessible and his enemy clear, he asks her where best to begin, and Ophelia tells him to head to Inabayama in Mino province, promising that he will find allies who will likely aid him against the Oda clan. Knowing by now of the Saito clan's reputation, as well as Samanosuke's, he presumes that they are who she's talking about, especially after their defeat of Nobunaga in 1567. Having said her piece, she tells him that she will go ahead and tell them to expect him, wishing him luck as she disappears through a Genma portal. Still shocked at his Genma heritage, but also grateful that he has the power to fight back, he heeds his mother's words and begins journeying towards Mino province. Ophelia returns to the Genma world, Guildenstern and Fortinbras both surprised and glad that she's still alive after not having seen her since the end of the war, and she finally tells them what she's been doing, also notifying them of her son's impending arrival at Inabayama. While initially shocked that she had a half-human child, the two are quick to see the advantage she had gained them, potentially regaining them their old alliance with the Yagyu clan. Guildenstern agrees to inform the Saito clan of Jubei's arrival, Yumemaru having taken over leadership from Samanosuke by now as previously agreed, and they immediately welcome his arrival once he gets there. They can't help but be rather surprised at the knowledge of a human with Genma blood, and Jubei soon learns that a total of 5 Genma warriors reside here as well, both Yumemaru and Eke having been given Genma power by now as well. He asks how they know about the Genma, and Samanosuke details the events 6 years prior, including the Oni's initial deception of him, saying that they've been working alongside the Genma ever since. While they are all glad to be building alliances, the Saito clan expect Nobutada to launch an assault on Inabayama soon in order to take revenge for Nobunaga's death, Kaede telling them that she had been scouting the Mino-Owari border not long before Jubei arrived and seeing Oda forces beginning to mass there. Before they can suggest any responsive action, Guildenstern rushes in and tells them that one of their old allies has suddenly gotten back in contact and requested emergency aid, revealing that the time seal on the Genma sacred place has suddenly been broken. Samanosuke is quick to offer aid, asking how the Genma broke the seal, but Guildenstern says that they didn't, theorising that the Oni were using what power they had left to keep the seal in place. Worried, he thinks that the Oni may be granting their power to more people, so much so that they were unable to maintain the seal anymore. He warns that the Genma had built a powerful weapon, one strong enough to spell defeat for them if the Oni managed to get their hands on it. Samanosuke asks Jubei to join him, and while Jubei does want to focus on the Oda clan, he is able to see that the Oni themselves pose an even greater threat, and he agrees to go as well. While the two prepare to head to the sacred place, Guildenstern also mentions that the weapon itself is a large battleship, with the power core being held in a separate temple below the sea, asking someone else to retrieve it. Being the most suited for such a task, Kaede offers to find the power core, Eke and Yumemaru staying behind in order to keep the castle protected in case of an attack, and Guildenstern opens 2 separate Genma portals to take them to their destinations. In the meantime, while Yumemaru and Eke begin coordinating their forces, Guildenstern decides to consult Fortinbras about the potential of giving their power to the rest of the Saito clan, especially since the Oni seem to be doing the same for the Oda clan. Seeing the dire situation, Fortinbras agrees, and they begin the process of turning the entire clan into Genma warriors, Hekuba also arriving and helping in order to try and speed up the process. However, almost immediately after they begin implementing this plan, a messenger arrives at the castle to deliver a letter to Yumemaru, and he soon reads it to discover that it is from Nagamasa Asai. It expresses their disdain for Nobutada's actions and requests to meet on neutral ground to discuss a potential alliance, causing Yuki to hope that it will allow them to further inhibit the Oni's influence. Yumimaru sends the assigned messenger back with a request to meet at the border of Mino and Omi provinces, and both Nagamasa and Oichi receive this response and agree, thinking it's the most reasonable decision. Meanwhile, Kaede soon arrives at the Undersea Temple to find a small number of Genma guarding it, them recognizing her as an ally and letting her through. Since the Oni were unable to locate the Undersea Temple during the war, Kaede is able to explore it without any hostilities whatsoever, though Ophelia soon arrives anyway to offer to help due to her familiarity of the structure. Grateful that she doesn't have to aimlessly wander, Kaede accepts the aid in her search, unable to help but marvel at the temple's architecture and wondering how it could be so advanced compared to humanity's capabilities. Ophelia explains that thanks to minds like Guildenstern, the Genma had always been significantly more advanced, though they would always share these advancements when the two races were openly coexisting. Once the Oni had cursed them, however, the Genma could no longer interact with humanity due to the latter's fear, and the Oni began to purge all Genma influence from them, leading them to forget the advancements made thanks to the Genma. Angered at the Oni's cruel manipulation, Kaede hopes that the Oni will someday be unmasked in front of the world, a hope that Ophelia shares. Kaede soon asks Ophelia if she really is Jubei's mother, and Ophelia confirms, explaining that she is among the only Genma capable of changing form, something that is near effortless for her due to her mastery of magic. She recounts the first time she had met Jubei's father, remaining disguised as a human to live among them long before their relationship began. It wasn't until the two were considering having a child that she revealed her true form, but was relieved when Ietoshi decided to remain with her anyway, leading to Jubei's birth the year after. Ophelia then lowers her head in shame and regret, explaining that while she wanted to be more involved in Jubei's life, she had no choice but to remain hidden in order to ensure she wasn't discovered by the Oni, something else that Ietoshi understood. In the end, however, she is happy to have finally met him face to face, and expresses just how proud she is of the man he has become, telling Kaede that it reminded her why she fought so hard for humanity. Kaede can't help but be moved by Ophelia's words, beginning to think of her relationship with Samanosuke and gaining an even greater resolve to defeat the Oni. Ophelia can't help but notice the look on her face and suggests that she has someone she loves as well, catching Kaede off guard when she asks if it's Samanosuke. Kaede hesitates a little, but Ophelia chuckles, admitting that she can see why Kaede is so fond of him. She stops and turns towards Kaede and tells her not to forget those feelings, instead making them another reason to fight, Kaede agreeing as they manage to open the northern chamber. Inside, they manage to retrieve the power core without issue, and Ophelia suggests keeping it within the Genma world until the time comes to use the Genbu itself. Kaede agrees, and Ophelia uses a Genma portal to take them back to Inabayama, Ophelia then taking the core back to Guildenstern in the Genma world. Upon returning from her successful mission, Kaede learns that they had received a request for alliance from the Asai clan, Yumimaru and Eke preparing to meet Nagamasa on the Mino-Omi border. Meanwhile, Samanosuke and Jubei reach the sacred place and end up meeting Gugen Dantes, the Genma warrior aware of their individual reputations and happy to meet them. He expresses a desire to test himself against them sometime, but also acknowledges that this isn't the time for that, readying his Genma forces for the incoming assault. The two ask for a report, and Dantes tells them that Genma scouts had sighted Oda forces making their way toward the island, warning that some of them were sighted wearing Oni gauntlets. As he says this, the sound of vessels approaching the island catches their attention as they see an arriving attack force of Oda soldiers, and they each ready themselves to defend the sacred place. The Oda forces land and begin their assault, led by a number of Oni warriors, and while the lesser Genma forces are outmatched by these warriors, the teamwork of Samanosuke, Jubei and Dantes prove to be extremely effective at holding them off. This gives the lesser Genma the chance to focus on those that are still purely human, and Samanosuke and Jubei are both quick to notice that Gugen Dantes is seemingly protected by a magic barrier, blocking the rare attack that Dantes fails to block himself. He briefly explains that this barrier is why the Oni resorted to placing a time seal on the island, having created an Oni flute to dispel his barrier, but failing to use it before he took it from them. As more Oni warriors begin to arrive, Samanosuke decides that now is the time to give something its first field test, Jubei and Dantes shifting their attention as they notice Samanosuke's blades suddenly surge with lightning. With a massive swing, Samanosuke channels lightning magic and strikes down multiple Oni warriors before they can defend themselves, the two worried for a moment until the smoke clears and Samanosuke is left unscathed in the blast. While Jubei has no point of reference, Dantes is able to see that Samanosuke's weapon looks strangely similar to an Oni weapon, though isn't in the position to ask anything as another wave of soldiers rushes towards them. As they do, however, a large creature suddenly stomps in from behind the Genma and begins crushing the Oda forces, Samanosuke quickly realising that Osric had arrived to reinforce the sacred place. While Jubei is a bit on edge at the sight of such a large monster, Samanosuke warmly greets him, and Osric turns to Samanosuke with a smirk, saying that he has no intention of letting Samanosuke overshadow him this time. By now, the two had spent the last few years sparring and improving together, so Osric proves to be a far greater threat as he tears through their enemies, fighting with more speed and precision than he used to. This four-man team proves too much for the Oda forces, and they are forced to sound the retreat, the majority of them having already fallen to the Genma's stalwart defence. Dantes can't help but be highly impressed at Osric's improvement over his usual brutish fighting style, and the latter tells of the improvements he was forced to make in order to keep up with Samanosuke, not wanting to be left behind by his rival. He and Samanosuke share a smirk, but Jubei turns to the latter and asks how he channeled lightning magic, Dantes agreeing and bringing up that it seems similar to Oni magic. Samanosuke explains that Guildenstern had continued his research on the gauntlets after successfully reviving the Genma sealed within, and was recently able to develop an experimental way to safely channel the Oni's magic without risk of corruption. Dantes asks how, since Samanosuke is still without a gauntlet of his own, and Samanosuke removes his armour and shows his bare chest, revealing the sight of Shiden being directly implanted into his body. While Osric is already aware of this, Jubei and Dantes are immediately stricken with concern, asking if such a thing is even safe. But Samanosuke assures that when Guildenstern had made this breakthrough, he had taken every measure necessary to minimise any potential risk, Samanosuke having complete trust in the scientist since they've been working together for the past 6 years. This is why his weapon now resembles Reizan, albeit the level 1 variant, and ensures that this more rudimentary method of channeling Oni power safely is little more than a temporary early test while Guildenstern continues working to create their own gauntlets. With them a little more reassured by this, Jubei asks Dantes about the presence of the Genbu, and Dantes confirms, explaining that it was sealed at the beginning of the Onin War. However, it can only be unsealed by someone of Genma origin, mentioning that Oni warriors like Samanosuke would be unable to do so. Even worse, as Dantes' face begins to show visible sorrow, he also reveals that since the Oni had cursed them, the Genbu was no longer able to recognise their blood, meaning that they cannot unseal the Genbu either. When asked if there's another way, Dantes remains unsure, but they all decide to head inside and see for themselves anyway, and Dantes leads them to the sacred place's Great Hall. Inside, he shows them a strange panel that is able to detect and recognise one's blood, but as he attempts to unseal it himself, the panel fails to react, demonstrating the issue of their now cursed blood. Samanosuke does the same and attempts to unseal the Genbu, but once again, the panel does not react since Samanosuke is not a natural Genma, and the four begin trying to work out another solution. However, just on the off chance, Jubei decides to make an attempt since he is a half Genma, and to everyone's shock, the panel actually recognises him and begins to glow, the Great Hall itself shaking around them as the Genbu is slowly unsealed. Once the full scale of the battleship presents itself, Osric asks Jubei how on earth he managed to do that, and Jubei reminds him that he is the son of Ophelia, Dantes reasoning that since the Genma were originally similar to humans, the mix of human and Genma blood within Jubei made it similar enough to their uncursed blood that the panel recognised him. With the Genbu now a viable option for them, Samanosuke suggests that they reseal it for now until they decide to actually use it in case the Oni and Oda clans launch another attack. The others agree, and Jubei once again places his hand on the panel, causing the Genbu to sink back into the ground and reseal itself. With this success, Dantes and Osric decide it best to remain on the island in order to ensure its safety, while Samanosuke and Jubei return to report their success to everyone else. Upon learning of Jubei's successful unsealing of the Genbu, Fortinbras, Guildenstern and Hecuba realise that Ophelia's foresight may have solely guaranteed their victory, not even comprehending the idea that their cursed blood could have left their old technology incapable of recognising them anymore. Once they return to Inabayama, Samanosuke and Jubei learn from Kaede and Yuki that they had received word that the Asai clan seek an alliance to defeat the Oda clan, Yumemaru and Eke having just left to meet Nagamasa at the Omi-Mino border, and they decide to wait for the two to return. Yumemaru and Eke soon reach the agreed upon meeting place, Nagamasa arriving soon after, though the two are surprised to find Oichi present as well. Hecuba, having been asked by Yumemaru before they arrived to keep an eye out for any funny business, stays out of sight and keeps watch, though is unable to recognise any trickery from Asai. Oichi's presence eases Yumemaru's concerns as well, assuming that she wouldn't have come if they were planning any treachery, and once introductions are made, Nagamasa and Oichi are quick to confirm their desire to oppose Nobutada. Having learnt of the attack on the Yagyu village following sightings of Oda's forces moving through Omi province to get there, he calls their actions monstrous and voices his disdain for Nobutada. Oichi chimes in and mentions sightings of strange gauntlets on some of their wrists, mentioning that it rings familiar to reports of a similarly odd gauntlet worn by the late Nobunaga during his attack on Inabayama. Intrigued that they are aware of them, Yumemaru asks just how much they know about these gauntlets, but they admit that they only know what a few rumours suggest, namely that Nobunaga used it in some way to assassinate Tatsuoki Saito 6 years ago, though it disappeared following his death there. They also mention rumours of monsters appearing at the time, but are unsure if there's any truth to it. Yumemaru decides to be open and confirms that it is all true, though immediately tells them that the supposed monsters actually attempted to stop Nobunaga. The two don't quite believe him, but Eke chimes in and confirms, admitting that the Genma are probably the only reason that the Saito clan survived that day. Yumemaru explains that Nobunaga had made a deal with the Oni clan after they had successfully revived him from his death in Okehazama, giving him their gauntlet and power to continue his conquest. Nagamasa, shocked at this revelation, comments that he had assumed that the rumours of Nobunaga's death in Okehazama were false, but Yumemaru confirms them, telling that the Oni had acquired his body and resurrected him. They ask why they didn't just resurrect him again after his defeat at Inabayama, and Yumemaru says that his body was crushed and immolated in the fires of the collapsing castle, making it too damaged for the Oni to revive him a second time. As for the monsters, Yumemaru reveals them as the Genma, and says that the Saito clan have worked alongside them ever since, telling of his near-death experience and survival thanks solely to them. Nagamasa still finds it difficult to believe, but Oichi is able to see the honesty in Yumemaru's eyes and is quicker to trust him, though as she is about to further question him, they are all interrupted by a faction of arriving Oda soldiers. To Nagamasa and Oichi's shock, they are led by none other than Oichi's maid, the very same maid that was assigned to her by Nobunaga when she and Nagamasa first married. Oichi is quick to question what she's doing here, but the maid simply smiles and thanks her for splitting Saito's forces and giving them a chance to divide and conquer. Yumemaru and Eke now angered at Nagamasa for tricking them. The two are quick to deny this, but the maid decides that she wants the satisfaction of killing them personally after playing maid for the past 7 years, and sheds her human disguise, sporting a large serpent-like tail as she identifies herself as the Oni Takajo. While the Asai forces are left bewildered by this, Takajo turns to Yumimaru and mockingly tells him that he grew up rather quickly, though expresses a mocking shame that he would throw in his lot with a group of monsters. Yumimaru angrily snaps back, labelling the Oni as the true monsters as he and Eke ready their weapons and begin channeling their Genma power, but Takajo just laughs and says that it doesn't matter what he thinks, promising that the Genma will fall and ordering her forces to attack. Yumimaru instantly lunges at her, but she quickly backs away and fires a stream of magic, binding him in place. Though when she attempts to capitalise, Eke ends up attacking and forcing her to back away once again, allowing Yumimaru to tap into his Genma power and break free of Takajo's magic. Now knowing of this ability, Yumimaru begins using his power to start firing waves of magic at her, and while she is able to dodge them, it does keep her at bay while the rest of the Saito forces do battle with hers. Given that their forces had already been split to attack the sacred place as well, not as many Oda soldiers possess gauntlets here, while a fair few Saito soldiers have already become Genma warriors, leading to a somewhat even fight. Meanwhile, Nagamasa and Oichi, alongside their own forces, are left completely flabbergasted, quickly realising that everything that Yumimaru had said was likely true. And while Nagamasa remains a bit unsure as for what to do, Oichi soon draws her broadsword with the intent of joining the fight. Nagamasa tries to talk her down, telling her that it's too dangerous, but Oichi counters, saying that it's clear now where the Saito clans stand and suggesting that they make their own choice as well. After turning back towards the fight, Nagamasa realises that she is right, drawing his own blade and ordering his forces to join the battle. While the number of Oni warriors aren't quite as high here, they do prove superior in one-on-one fights and slowly begin to gain a bit of momentum against the Saito clan, but as Takajo attempts to use her magic against Yumimaru and Eke, she is suddenly slashed from behind by Oichi, knocking her off balance. While the attack isn't fatal, it does deal noticeable damage, and Takajo is left both shocked and furious at Oichi's actions, labelling her a traitor to Nobutada. Nagamasa and the rest of their own forces join the battle as well, outnumbering the Oda forces and pushing them back, causing the tide of the battle to almost instantly turn against them. Nagamasa and Oichi stand firm alongside Yumimaru and Eke, and while she attempts to fight back, their numbers, alongside the strength and skill of Yumimaru and Eke, forces her to see that it's not a fight that she can win, especially once she starts noticeably flagging from Oichi's wound. Deciding that escape is her best option, Takajo promises dire consequences for the Asai clan as she uses her magic to warp away before they can finish her off. This allows the four to join their forces against the Oda foot soldiers, but the sight of Takajo fleeing throws them into complete disarray, panicking and attempting to flee themselves as the Saito Asai team-up proves too much for them to handle. With the battle won, Yumimaru is quick to question Nagamasa and Oichi, but they swear that they were completely unaware of Takajo's presence, Oichi explaining that her maid was assigned to her by Nobunaga when she and Nagamasa were first wed. Now coming out of hiding, Hekuba suddenly approaches them in human form and suggests that she was there as an Oni plant to remain aware of any secret plans made that would threaten them. Eke asks her why she didn't intervene earlier, but she apologises and says that she didn't want to risk alienating the Asai clan before they had the chance to secure an alliance. While a little confused, Nagamasa and Oichi work out that she must be at least affiliated with the Genma, and she introduces herself with her real name, though doesn't outright say that she is a Genma in disguise. Nagamasa outright asks her if she is, and Hekuba tentatively confirms, telling that she is among the few capable of hiding their true forms, asking them all to step back as she sheds her disguise. Now in her true form, she shamefully tells them that this is what the Oni have done to the Genma, before changing back to her human form in order to calm the now panicking Asai soldiers. Once everyone calms down, she asks if Nobunaga had assigned anyone else to Oichi, but she says no, and Hekuba offers to do a quick sweep of Odani Castle just to ensure that no more Oni spies are present. Nagamasa is a little hesitant to accept Genma aid, but decides to agree on the condition that it is done in human form to avoid causing panic throughout the castle. Hekuba finds this reasonable and agrees, deciding to ask Ophelia to help out as well once they return. By now, Nagamasa is unable to deny the consistency of Yumemaru and Hakuba's claims, and he decides to trust them, agreeing to work with both the Saito clan and the Genma to defeat the Oda and Oni clans. They agree that once it is confirmed that no more Oni spies are hiding within Odani Castle, they will begin making preparations to oppose Nobutada together. With this, the two clans amicably part and return to their respective territories, Hakuba and Ophelia arriving in their human forms to Odani soon after the Asai clan return themselves. They begin sweeping the castle in an attempt to locate any traces of Oni magic, but after searching everywhere they can, they come up with nothing, concluding that Takajo was the only spy stationed there. With the knowledge that they needn't worry about their plans being leaked anymore, the Asai clan, assuming that they will receive retaliation for their betrayal, begin to prepare themselves for a potential attack, asking Hakuba and Ophelia to inform Yumemaru as such. While the Saito clan remain hopeful with this new alliance, Nobutada is soon informed by Takajo of Nagamasa and Oichi's treachery, furiously dubbing them traitors and deciding to move his forces with the newly named Hideyoshi to launch an attack on Odani Castle. Nagamasa soon receives word of Oda forces massing at the Omi border, sneaking through the south of Mino province to reach Ise and gather forces for an attack from the south. Nagamasa sends word to Yumemaru, requesting his aid since he knows that his forces cannot defeat the Oda's Oni magic on their own, and the Saito forces, worried that they may lose this new ally so quickly, begin coming up with a plan to try and split Nobutada's forces. It's then that Yuki hits on an idea, reminding them that Nobutada's aggression started because of his desire for revenge against Samanosuke for Nobunaga's death, suggesting that they use that blind hatred to their advantage. Eke asks if she's really suggesting that they use Samanosuke as bait, an idea that Kayade instantly opposes, but Guildenstern chimes in and says that it may be possible without putting Samanosuke at risk. While Nobutada splits his forces to chase the bait, the majority of Saito's forces would be sent to reinforce Asai, while Jubei joins Dantes and Osric to awaken the Genbu, taking the core with him in order to pilot it and use it to devastate Oda's forces. Once Guildenstern makes clear how he plans to trick Nobutada with bait, the party agree with the plan and immediately begin taking action, Jubei being warped back to the sacred place to give Osric and Dantes the heads up. Soon, Samanosuke infiltrates Owari province from the northwest border, ensuring that he is seen by as many soldiers as possible, and a report reaches Nobutada of his sightings. As predicted, Nobutada's hatred for Samanosuke leads him to order Hideyoshi to find him and take his head, Hideyoshi accepting as he expects this to mean that an attack from the Saito clan while they are in Omi is imminent. Yumemaru leads his Saito forces towards Omi, and his scouts soon report that Hideyoshi, as well as a detachment of soldiers, have been sighted returning to Owari, confirming that they took the bait. As Nobutada begins his march towards Odani Castle, his own scouts tell him that Saito forces have been seen approaching Odani as well, also learning that Samanosuke had been somehow seen with them. Completely baffled, Nobutada questions how that is even possible if he was first seen in Owari, but this confusion turns to rage as he begins to realise that he had been tricked, wondering what he just sent Hideyoshi after. In Owari, Hideyoshi is successful in tracking down Samanosuke, though is surprised to see him without any reinforcements. He mockingly questions if he really expected to take Owari alone, but Samanosuke smiles and doesn't say a word, Hideyoshi watching in horror as Samanosuke suddenly morphs into Nobutada. At this sight, Hideyoshi is suddenly hit with the realization that this was just a trick, especially when a Genma portal forms behind the fake Nobutada, the doppelganger walking backwards into it and escaping without a word. Guildenstern had sent Stellardo to shapeshift into Samanosuke in order to draw Hideyoshi away. Realizing that he had been tricked, Hideyoshi orders his forces to rush back to Omi province, hoping that they can return fast enough to save Nobutada. Upon Stellardo's return, Ophelia warps to the sacred place and tells Jubei, Osric and Dantes that Nobutada and Hideyoshi took the bait, deciding that now is the time to unseal and use the Genbu. Jubei heads into the Great Hall with the three of them and unseals the Genbu, and once they attach the power core, Ophelia stays with them to help pilot it as they head towards Odani Castle. Realizing not only that the Samanosuke here is real, but that he had been tricked, Nobutada is left furious as his forces are slowly pushed back by the Saito and Asai clan's combined might, and decides to challenge him personally to avenge his father. Samanosuke accepts this challenge, while Yumemaru, Kaede and Eke rush to help Nagamasa and Oichi, the latter refusing to sit this fight out since Nobutada is her nephew. This overall puts Nobutada and his forces in a poor position, with the teamwork of the Saito and Asai clans pushing back against his own, while he finds himself being overwhelmed due to Samanosuke's skill and experience. Now getting extremely frustrated, Nobutada desperately taps into Boruto's lightning magic for a powerful attack, but with his own Genma-infused Reizan, Samanosuke ends up matching Nobutada's magic with his own. As their blades clash, the colliding lightning magic explodes, sending a shockwave around them that blasts everyone back, though Samanosuke is able to stand his ground a bit easier than Nobutada. As Nobutada tries to land another blow, his attention is caught by the sight of the Genbu flying overhead, shouting in frustration as it begins firing on his forces, leaving them devastated. With his plans falling apart, Nobutada reaches a breaking point, and as the Genbu comes around for another pass, his gauntlet reacts to his rage as he screams in fury, a massive pillar of purple light shooting upwards and striking the Genbu overhead, damaging the power core. The damage from this explosion of Oni power forces Jubei to make a crash landing on the battlefield itself, while everyone else is flung back by Nobutada's sudden power surge. As the dust from the Genbu's crash begins to clear, Jubei and the three Genma managing to escape alive, everyone is horrified to find that Nobutada has managed to transform into an Onimusha. While Yumemaru and Eke try to cover Nagamasa and Oichi, Samanosuke taps into his Genma power and attempts to rush at Nobutada, but the Onimusha effortlessly swats him away, now far too powerful for Samanosuke to contend with. Still zeroed in on him, Onimusha Nobutada closes the distance and launches a powerful attack atop Samanosuke, the latter only barely able to dodge out of the way in time as it cracks the earth beneath him. Unable to fight back now, Samanosuke is forced to just keep dodging Nobutada's wild attacks, the latter no longer in full control of his actions as he furiously tries to kill his opponent. Seeing this, while Ophelia tries and fails to stop him, Jubei taps into his own power and tries to attack Nobutada himself, but the Onimusha is able to react and counter, slashing at Jubei and launching him back towards the Crash Genbu. Horrified, Ophelia desperately tries to heal him, seeing that his wound is bordering on fatal, and Nobutada resumes swinging for Samanosuke, him now losing steam as his stamina drains from the constant dodging. Kaede and Eke attempt to rush in and help, but like Jubei, Nobutada effortlessly slashes them aside, both heavily injured from the attack. While Yumemaru, Nagamasa and Oichi try to tend to the two, Dantes and Osric do what they can to hold off what's left of Nobutada's forces. But with Samanosuke now losing stamina, he soon finds himself unable to dodge anymore, as Nobutada prepares to finally kill him. Unwilling to watch Nobutada kill another innocent, Jubei's Genma power erupts, catching the Onimusha's attention as he sees Jubei transform into an empowered Genma form, growing similar wings to Ophelia, as well as 4 thin, sharp mandibles. Think something along the lines of Marvel's Iron Spider or Devourer from Mortal Kombat. His sword itself begins to resemble the Starbreaker, and Jubei's ability to utilize magic skyrockets, able to channel multiple elements similar to Nobunaga in both of his final battles. Now gaining a second wind with this new power, he tells Ophelia to focus on healing the others as he darts forward and strikes Nobutada, the Onimusha initially not reacting until it's too late, not actually expecting him to be able to deal any damage. He is proven horribly wrong as Jubei's attack actually draws blood, The Onimusha now forced to focus entirely on Jubei since his strength now effectively matches Nobunaga's strength in his final battle in Onimusha 3. Seeing both his wounds and his exhaustion, Ophelia focuses on healing Samanosuke first, moving to the others once the worst of his injuries are healed. As they all slowly get back on their feet, they are all left awestruck at Jubei's power as he is actually able to resist the Onimusha's attacks and counterattack. The two soon find themselves locking blades, but Jubei is able to take advantage by piercing his opponent with his mandibles, staggering him as Jubei lands another powerful slash. Now getting more desperate, the Onimusha's attacks become more wild, though Jubei is able to dodge and weave away from them while tapping further into his dark magic, shooting magic fireballs at him. Caught off guard, the first couple of shots actually hit their target, forcing the Onimusha to either block or dodge the rest, while Jubei uses more of his magic to begin laying damaging pools around them, causing more damage whenever Nobutada comes into contact with them. While he does find himself able to absorb the pools, Jubei's constant pressure makes him unable to find the chance. Now beginning to stagger from the damage, Nobutada watches as the dark puddles around him are absorbed into Jubei's sword, causing it to glow an ominous purple. In one final act of desperation, Nobutada dashes forward and attempts to land one final attack, but with his strengthened blade, Jubei brings it crashing down atop his opponent, breaking Nobutada's sword in half and slicing through his torso. With this final attack, Onimusha Nobutada finally drops to the ground, reverting back to his human form as he lay dead before Genma Jubei. As he also reverts back and drops to his knees, stunned by his own power, the remaining Oda forces immediately fly into a panic and sound a full retreat, knowing that this fight is all but lost. As a result, Odani Castle survives the siege in its entirety, and Ophelia is soon able to heal those heavily wounded as both Nagamasa and Oichi thank them all for helping defend Odani, conceding that they would never have survived if they faced Nobutada alone. While everyone, including Jubei, are shocked at his new power, Ophelia tells him that he had managed to tap into the full force of his Genma blood, promising to help him learn to utilize it at will. Dantes is unable to contain his excitement at the prospect of sparring against Jubei someday, while Osric jokes with Samanosuke that the two will need to work hard to catch up to Jubei's new power. Now able to clearly see that the Genma are truly not evil, Nagamasa and Oichi ask Ophelia for the full story, and Ophelia tells them of their past as well as the full consequences of the Onin War. She reveals that in the final days, she was among those who had already seen the writing on the wall, and decided to go into hiding in order to try and find a way to undermine the Oni in the future, though admits that her colleagues weren't as lucky. Oichi asks who she means, and Ophelia says that it's something she hadn't found the right time to reveal to the Saito clan yet, agreeing that now is as good a time as any. While even the Saito clan are a bit confused, Ophelia explains that she was one of 3 members of the Genma Triumvirate, a trio of powerful Genma that stood below only Fortinbras in authority. She was a priestess who specialised in magic, dedicating herself to healing all those who needed her and acting as a frontline medic throughout the war itself. She continues that after she went into hiding, the scientist Rosencrantz and the Chancellor Claudius were sealed within the underworld alongside Fortinbras's godly power. Yumemaru asks her why she didn't say anything, and she says that her being the last surviving member of the Triumvirate put her at the top of the Oni's most wanted list, so she had no choice but to remain as anonymous as possible, explaining that to be the only reason that she kept hidden from Jubei as he grew up. Now that the Oni are aware that she has returned, they should expect some form of retaliation, but she remains grateful that she can finally reveal herself again. Aware that Hideyoshi had survived the battle due to being led away, they all agree that preparation is necessary, Nagamasa and Oichi requesting open contact to coordinate their efforts in the future. The Saito clan and Genma agree, and they say their farewells as they make the return journey to Inabayama. Jubei decides to head back to Yamato province and begin the process of rebuilding the Yagyu village, thanking everyone for helping him avenge his village's destruction, and promising that the Yagyu clan will stand with Saito in the future should they be needed. While everyone returns to their homes and celebrates their victory, Hideyoshi soon learns of Nobutada's defeat at Odani and is left furious that they fell so easily for the Genma's trap, an anger that is shared by the Oni clan, especially now that they are aware of Ophelia's survival. While they want her hunted down, however, they are painfully aware that they simply do not have the manpower or resources to launch another large-scale attack. Takajo also remains frustrated that she was unable to manipulate Saito and Asai against each other, and with their dangerously low numbers, she and the rest of the Oni decide that their best bet is to attempt to bring about the birth of the Black Oni. With Hideyoshi as the only Oni warrior they have left, they are left with little choice but to bide their time until they can resurrect the God of Darkness. Hideyoshi himself suggests attempting to build an alliance with Ieyasu Tokugawa in the meantime, seeing him and his clan as the greatest potential threat against the Saito clan right now, and Takajo agrees, though also begins working on a backup plan in case pitting Ieyasu against Yumemaru doesn't pan out. With Jubei coordinating the Yagyu village's reconstruction, Samanosuke decides to ask Guildenstern to send Genma to aid him, and with Fortinbras' approval, Genma begin to appear throughout the village and begin aiding in its restoration, all brought there by Ophelia. While he is surprised at their sudden appearance, he is grateful for their help, and the foundations are completed rather quickly as a result. However, Jubei asks Ophelia for them to temporarily leave while the surviving members of the Yagyu clan begin to make their return, reminding her that he is the only Yagyu aware of the Genma's true nature. Ophelia agrees and sends them back, though she remains in the village while under her disguise in order to begin making up for lost time with her son. As the survivors begin returning to the village, Guildenstern instead decides to contact Nagamasa and request that he send some of his own human forces to aid in the reconstruction, and Nagamasa agrees, Ophelia and Jubei receiving word of the extra incoming help. As a result of this extra manpower, the Yagyu village is rebuilt significantly faster, giving Jubei more time to begin telling his clan the truth about the Oni and Genma, including the fact that he holds Genma blood. While the clan is shocked at this revelation, especially when Jubei channels his Genma power as proof, they remain without a reason to distrust his judgment, and while the whole process is slow going, they eventually learn to accept the Genma. Meanwhile, Hideyoshi makes an attempt to build an alliance with Ieyasu Tokugawa, but with the Oda clan nearly wiped out after the failed attack on Odani, Ieyasu instead wants them as a subservient clan instead of an equal, not seeing them as a threat. This is doubled by the fact that Hideyoshi, with no Oda heirs left, had taken what was left of the Oda clan and created the Hashiba clan, making himself look new and unproven. While he hates the idea of being subservient, Hideyoshi is left with no choice but to comply if he doesn't want to create more enemies, though the Oni clan still finds this acceptable since they can still work from within the Tokugawa clan now. Takajo is very quick to act once this alliance is arranged, taking notice of Ieyasu himself as well as his concubines. She notices one woman in particular, Lady Oman, as someone that Ieyasu is particularly close to, and decides to act immediately, managing to assassinate her in secret and take her form without Ieyasu noticing. With this, she plays the role of concubine and soon becomes pregnant as a result, hoping to be able to give birth to the Black Oni herself. The next year, Ogimaru Tokugawa is born, and the Oni gods realise that she had actually succeeded, able to sense that he is indeed the Black Oni, planning to let him grow within the Tokugawa household until his Oni nature manifests. At the same time, the Yagyu village is fully rebuilt, with the Genma slowly reappearing to help finish whatever work is left in order to get the rest of the clan used to their presence. By the end, the Yagyu clan begin to fully accept them, and with Ophelia also having revealed herself to them by now, Jubei offers her a permanent place within the village. While she is overjoyed at the prospect, she concedes that it's probably best that she remains within the Genma world until the Oni are defeated so as to not add another target on the Yagyu. Understanding her reasoning, he asks if she would at least be willing to help him train the next generation of Yagyus, to which she agrees, leading to her becoming more acquainted with her grandchildren, including Munenori, as she helps train them. As for the Saito clan, the reputation gained by practically destroying the Oda clan causes more and more other clans to begin allying with them, especially with the already existing support of the Asai clan. The first to arrange an alliance is actually Mitsuhide Akechi, promising the full support of the Akechi clan, and with Samanosuke vouching for his uncle, it's an easy alliance to accept. Having publicly backed the Saito clan, and also maintained contact with Yuki since 1567, Sokyu Imai's word also begins to sway the Sakai clan. While he isn't a lord per se, he is still a baron who holds some level of influence, and the Sakai clan soon decides to ally themselves with Yumemaru. At this point, it becomes clear to everyone just how quickly their clan has grown, and Guildenstern actually suggests the idea of spreading their influence throughout the country in order to further reduce the Oni's potential sphere of influence. Yumemaru, however, is extremely hesitant at the idea, remembering Samanosuke's anti-war teachings and not wanting to become just another conqueror, labelling the idea hypocritical. Guildenstern retorts, saying that he doesn't have to necessarily resort to conquest, only spread their own sphere of influence by continuing to build alliances. He does note that they will likely encounter those unwilling to cooperate, but they only need to defend themselves, not go on the attack, using their influence to seed their knowledge throughout the country and make them aware of the cruelty of the Oni. With alliances already secured in Omi, Yamato, Sakai and Mino provinces, they can't help but admit that it's not a bad idea that they already have a good starting point on. It's here that Yuki decides to speak up, suggesting that Yumemaru share his authority with those he trusts, ensuring that the Saito clan governs from a broader perspective while also maintaining their integrity, Yumemaru himself acting as the sole figurehead in public. Thinking that a single ruler could lead to an abuse of power, everyone, including Yumemaru, agrees, and he decides to give significant influence to Samanosuke, Kaede, and Yuki. Having stuck with the Saito clan for nearly 10 years at this point, Eke is also trusted with authority, and with his dream of becoming a feudal lord in order to give his daughter a comfortable life, the fact that this would allow Omio to live like a princess cements his total loyalty to the Saito clan. I know this is the first time we've mentioned her by name, but since we don't actually know for certain what her canon name is, we'll call Eke's daughter Omio from now on, just for simplicity's sake. The Asai and Yagyu clans almost immediately learn of this decision from the Genma, and are quick to voice their support given that they already have a level of established trust for the Saito clan. Hekuba also plans to make a move of her own, thinking that she may finally be able to secure the alliance of the Saigo clan if they can broker peace with Ieyasu Tokugawa first, explaining that she couldn't get Saigo support before because they are already subservient to the Tokugawa clan. Yumemaru decides to ask Kaede to deliver a letter to Ieyasu requesting a meeting to discuss a possible alliance, and she soon reaches Mikawa province to deliver it personally. To her pleasant surprise, Ieyasu seems rather open to the idea and agrees to visit Yumemaru personally, already aware of the events surrounding the Saito-Oda conflict. While he still does want to conquer the country for his own clan, he is fully aware that the Saito clan have become much too powerful for him to be able to defeat now, deciding that it's better to forge an alliance than make themselves enemies. Meanwhile, Eke is also sent to see if he can secure any other alliances, and with much of central Japan already in the cards, he decides to head west instead. He soon finds himself in Tamba province and ends up coming across Motohiro Kikawa, getting along with him quite well due to their mutual enjoyment of alcohol, and soon being invited to see Motonari Mori in Aki province. Being the perfect opportunity to secure an alliance in the west, Eke accepts the invitation, and Motoharu takes him back to Mori territory. Upon arriving and meeting the Mori lord, Eke is surprised to know that his reputation as the master of the Hozuin spear has reached Motonari as well, and he is asked if he would consider lending his talents to the Mori clan. While flattered at the offer, Eke respectfully declines as he is already employed by the Saito clan, though this knowledge only intrigues Motonari, knowing that the Saito clan had brought down the Oda clan when the Mori clan could not. Motonari brings up the possibility of an alliance, and Eke confirms that Yumemaru would absolutely be open to the idea, and he is asked if he could arrange a meeting to begin peace talks. Eke heartily agrees, and a grateful Motonari offers him accommodation for the night, preparing a carriage back to Inabayama the next day. Again, like most other clans, while he is aware of the rumours concerning the Oni and Genma, he isn't certain whether or not he trusts their legitimacy. As for Samanosuke and Kaede, having gathered the many gauntlets of the fallen Oda soldiers of both the Sacred Place and Omi Province, they focus on trying to help Guildenstern with his research, having also grabbed Nobutada's gauntlet along with the orb that gave him Boraito. While Guildenstern is glad that Samanosuke was able to safely use the Oni power of Reizan without issue, he primarily focuses on attempting to refine the process and create a method that doesn't require a surgical implant. After about a week since Kaede returns with Ieyasu's message, Ieyasu himself arrives at Inabayama for their peace talks, and both he and Yumemaru express a mutual respect for one another, Yuki also being present during this meeting. Yumemaru thanks him for coming, expressing a hope that this could be the beginning of the end for the constant conflicts across the land. But while Ieyasu has similar hopes, he asks what Yumemaru wants from their own alliance. Yumemaru simply asks for assurance from Ieyasu himself that their clans would stand together against any future aggressors, as well as assurance that he would not threaten the Saito clan or their allies. Ieyasu has no issue with these demands, finding them rather reasonable, and Yumemaru asks him what he would want in return. Cocking a bit of a smirk, Ieyasu asks what they know about the Genma and Oni, Yumemaru and Yuki freezing for a moment until Yuki tentatively asks him what he already knows. Ieyasu, not wanting to give them free information that they may or may not already have, simply tells them that one of his own allies has had some interesting information on them, much of it contradicting what most people seem to believe. It doesn't take long for Yuki and Yumemaru to work out that said ally is most likely the clan that Hekuba had mentioned, though seeing that Ieyasu is not willing to show his own hand first, Yumemaru concedes and reveals his knowledge of the Oni and Genma. Being told of the Genma's benevolent nature leaves Ieyasu rather quizzical, asking how monsters could be benevolent, but he is soon told of the Oni's curse laid upon them following the Onin War. Given that the Genma have not shown to have corrupted people like they do in canon, Ieyasu does not have the same disdain for them as usual, instead beginning to view the Oni as such. He admits that their information, outlandish as it may sound, seems rather consistent with what he had learned from the Saigo clan, asking if Yumemaru has had any contact with them. Not wanting to out Hekuba, Yumemaru says that they haven't, and while Ieyasu feels unable to ignore the clear patterns, Yumemaru sees his opportunity to sway him further and offers the chance to speak with a Genma himself, saying that they have worked alongside them for many years. Even more intrigued at this offer, Ieyasu actually decides to give it a try, wanting to make his own decision rather than only relying on the potentially biased perspective of Yumemaru. Yuki asks them to wait a moment and leaves to enter the Genma world, explaining the situation to Guildenstern and asking him to speak with Ieyasu for a moment. Fully aware that Ieyasu is the most influential warlord next to Yumemaru at this point, the fact that he is even willing to speak to a Genma is already a major victory, so he jumps at the chance to try and sway him from the Oni. The two return, Ieyasu instantly on edge at the sight of the scientist, though is reminded of the aforementioned curse once Guildenstern begins speaking, respectfully greeting the man. Ieyasu begins to question him, and Guildenstern confirms all that he has been told, both by Yumemaru and the Saigo clan. Ieyasu asks Guildenstern why the Genma have decided to side with the Saito clan, and Guildenstern recounts the events 7 years prior, explaining that the Oda clan had become servants of the Oni clan, forcing the Genma to intervene and prevent the Oni from using Nobunaga to resume their destructive conquest. He stresses the dangers of Oni manipulation, mentioning that even Samanosuke was deceived by their lies, though he thankfully realised that he was on the wrong side. At this point, Ieyasu begins to reconsider his ultimate stance on the Genma, and Guildenstern requests that, if possible, he aid them in unmasking the Oni's lies and freeing the land of their influence once and for all. After a moment of thought, Ieyasu requests assurance that the Genma would aid him in return should it be needed, a request that both Guildenstern and Yumemaru have no issue agreeing to. Seeing the advantage of having both the Saito clan and the Genma as allies, Ieyasu agrees to their terms and an alliance is formed, Ieyasu returning to Mikawa province soon after. Upon his return, Ieyasu contacts the Saigo clan and requests more of their information concerning the Genma, and they, learning from Hakuba of recent events, are quick to send him what documents they have. As he reads over the Saigo clan's info, he only continues to see more parallels to what he learned from Yumemaru and Guildenstern, further convincing him that he had made the right decision to form an alliance. Knowing this, the Saigo clan decide to finally make contact themselves now that there won't be any blowback from Ieyasu, and Inabayama is soon visited by Lady Saigo no Tsubone. With her clan being one of the only humans to have always known the truth about the Genma, she expresses relief that the Saito clan are actively attempting to help unmask the Oni's falsehoods. Being warmly welcomed at Inabayama, it isn't long before she and Yumemaru actually begin to hit it off a little, Tsubone appreciating that he is attempting to unite the country through more peaceful methods rather than conquest. She remains at Inabayama for a few days, the two of them growing rather fond of each other, and is happy promising her clan's full support of the Saito clan from now on. She soon returns to Mikawa province, though does look forward to their next meeting, and Yuki is quick to tease Yumemaru about their obvious attraction, much to his embarrassment. Only a few days later, Eke returns from Aki province with news of Motonari's request for peace talks, inciting even further hope in a peacefully united country. Happy with building another alliance, Yumemaru gives similar terms to those he gave Ieyasu, though asks Eke to return and spearhead the negotiations since he already had such a positive interaction with Motonari. Eke agrees, though asks Yumemaru to have some good drinks ready for when he returns, Yumemaru unable to help but laugh as he promises the best drinks he can buy, much to Eke's delight. Omiyo does snap a little at Yumemaru for encouraging her father after he leaves, but while her mother scolds her a bit for her tone, Yumemaru, maintaining his similar casual attitude to his canon self in Blade Warriors, can only laugh even more, saying that Eke should be able to have a bit of fun after all the negotiations are finished. Eke soon reaches Aki province once again and lays out Yumemaru's terms for an alliance, and Motonari is rather happy to have the protection of the Saito clan, asking about the specifics of the Genma's involvement. Eke recounts the events from 1567 onwards, assuring that this alliance also means an alliance with the Genma, meaning more security should the Oni make another move. Not really seeing any downside to this, Motonari agrees to Yumemaru's terms, and Eke returns once again to Inabayama to inform them of their successful alliance with the Mori clan. After achieving so many victories in such a short span of time, they all decide to arrange a celebratory banquet, with the likes of Guildenstern, Hakuba, Dantes, Osric and Ophelia also joining the feast. Delighted at their massive progress, it dawns on them that they have effectively united most of central Japan, while also having gained a foothold in western Japan thanks to Eke's successful talks with the Mori clan. On top of this, Guildenstern mentions that he feels like he is approaching a massive breakthrough in his research of the Oni gauntlets, hoping that he may soon find a way to harness their power without a surgical implant. At this point, everyone agrees that this is a good time to start getting the ball rolling on spreading the truth of the Oni and Genma on a larger scale, while also beginning to slowly but surely phase the Genma into open roles in order to get the general public used to seeing them. With all of this on the table, Ophelia decides to bring up another long-term plan of her own, bringing up the idea of breaking the seal on the underworld and freeing the remaining members of the Triumvirate. Guildenstern, having tried and failed to do so ever since the war, suggests needing human help to do so since the Oni made it impossible for the Genma to break the seal themselves, though through sheer oversight had simply assumed that humans would never be capable. While everyone is willing to try, they are not entirely sure how, and Guildenstern suggests that the clan keep working on building alliances in the hopes that it could get them in contact with people able to help. Not long after this banquet, Ieyasu gets in contact with Yumemaru, and as a show of goodwill for their new alliance, offers to arrange a marriage between him and Tsubone, with Yuki encouraging the idea to a slightly flustered Yumemaru. Still in direct contact with the Saigo clan, Hekuba is quick to tell him that Tsubone is actually rather happy with the idea, and realising that he had grown rather fond of her as well, Yumemaru accepts. The two are married in early 1575, and she begins residing within Inabayama Castle from now on, and with everyone welcoming her quite warmly, relations between the Saito and Saigo clans grow extremely tight. At this point, the Saito clan is regarded as the most powerful clan in the country, and more clans scramble to build an alliance so as not to risk becoming enemies. A small number of clans do scramble for their own chance of power at first, such as the dysfunctional Nambu clan who attempt to challenge the Saito clan, though the rival Tsugaru clan choose to stand with Saito. Once Saigo gives aid to Tsugaru, the Nambu clan are soon defeated, allowing Tsugaru to take dominion over Nambu's territory, Saito allowing this as a reward for standing in their defense. While this does have them come to potential blows with the Date clan, Saito begins putting pressure on them both for the conflict to end, and they end up agreeing on splitting the province between each other, Tsugaru maintaining the northern half of the region. In the neighbouring Dewa province, the Mogami clan is quick to follow suit and arrange an alliance of their own, giving the Saito clan a massive foothold in eastern Japan, and like a line of dominoes, the rest of the country begin to pledge loyalty as well. As this is happening, Guildenstern's promised breakthrough finally occurs, at last managing to create their own gauntlets capable of harnessing both Genma and Oni power without the risk of corruption. With this success, Samanosuke immediately undergoes another procedure in order to safely remove Shiden from his body, and once it's ready, he becomes the first to wield a Genma gauntlet. Samanosuke attempts to place Shiden inside it and successfully regains Reizan, able to utilise the same Oni power with full control, and with this success, Guildenstern begins working to mass produce these gauntlets, giving the first three to Kaede, Yumemaru and Eke. Once the four of them gain their gauntlets, they begin to get handed out throughout the Saito clan's forces, leading to a massive increase in the clan's overall strength, and Fortinbras decides that this is the best time to begin work on the Underworld Seal. More alliances and skirmishes would occur over the next few years, but by 1580, the Saito clan effectively becomes entirely dominant, marking the beginning of the Saito shogunate as the country unites under Yumemaru's rule, now becoming known as Yumemaru the Unifier. With this, they begin using their countrywide influence to fully rewrite the Oni's false history, and the Oni clan can only watch as the country begins to turn on them entirely, enraged that their grip on humanity almost entirely slips away. In an act of desperation and frustration, Takajo decides to order Hideyoshi to try and arrange a rebellion against Yumemaru. Over the next few years, Hideyoshi gets into secret contact with other lords to try and subtly fish out those willing to overthrow the Saito clan, and while most of the country proves content with the Saito clan's rule, he is at least successful in gaining the support of Yoshiaki Ashikaga and Kagekatsu Yusugi. The three lords begin to slowly gather their forces in the hopes of finally defeating Yumemaru, the Oni giving Yoshiaki and Kagekatsu their power, with Yoshiaki gaining Kuga and Kagekatsu gaining Hyojin Yari. In late 1580, Inabayama ends up getting a visitor, this visitor turning out to be Luis Frois, having already spent a few years in Kyushu and wanting to meet the Unifier himself. Quickly taking notice of Luis's inherent kindness, he is invited to stay in Inabayama for a while, and the Portuguese missionary soon expresses a desire to meet the Genma, their reputation having significantly improved across the country by now. This leads him to meeting Guildenstern, and the two end up getting along rather well, especially once Guildenstern learns how intelligent Luis really is, asking if he would be willing to help their research. Luis agrees to do what he can, and he is given a permanent residence within the castle as he works alongside both Guildenstern and Ophelia to try and break the seal on the underworld. This team-up ends up proving fruitful, and Luis manages to find a way to break the seal after a few weeks of effort, telling them that it will take around a month before he is able to free the Triumvirate from their underworld prison. Delighted that her colleagues will finally be freed, Ophelia hopes that with all three, they will be able to find a way to pull the Omen Star from the underworld as well, hoping to restore Fortinbras' godhood in case the Black Oni returns. In Mikawa province, Ogimaru grows up as the sole male heir of Ieyasu Tokugawa, with both Hidetada and Tadayoshi not having been born, and Nobuyasu having been executed the year prior alongside his mother, Lady Tsukiyama. While Ogimaru's personality is mostly the same as canon, he finds himself plagued with random bouts of explosive rage, soon rendering him unconscious after he calms down. He often wakes up with little memory of these episodes, but Ieyasu becomes very quickly concerned and frustrated that this will not only hinder his progress, but also render him unfit as the Tokugawa heir. Still in disguise as Lady Oman, Takajo regularly feigns ignorance about what's happening, but attempts to secretly encourage her son to embrace this power, knowing that it is in fact his Oni nature bleeding through. After a month or so, Luis is successful in breaking the underworld seal enough for Claudius and Rosencrantz to escape, though they are rendered so weak that they are incapable of fully manifesting, reduced to the same dark puddles we see in canon. Once they learn of current events, they instantly begin trying to find a way to restore their bodies, hoping to find temporary hosts until they can manifest on their own. Now rather hopeful since humanity has begun to accept them again, they begin searching for good fits, though Rosencrantz is quick to take notice of Luis, taking a liking to him due to his kindness and intelligence. Claudius and Ophelia notice that the two are rather similar, and Rosencrantz asks Luis to co-inhabit his body, assuring that he will not force the man to do anything he wouldn't otherwise want to do. Luis, a known good judge of character, decides to agree, and he willingly allows Rosencrantz in, the Genma keeping his promise to simply inhabit his body as opposed to outright possessing it. Claudius's choice is far more difficult, however, knowing not to try Yumemaru so as to not jeopardize his clan's rule. Eventually, he decides to settle with Samanosuke, asking him the same as Rosencrantz and promising that his habitation will only last until he can manifest himself. Unsurprisingly, Kaede is the first to object, not liking the idea of anyone sharing his body despite having complete trust in the Genma by now, and Claudius tries to offer a compromise. He suggests that they focus primarily on restoring the Triumvirate first, only going ahead with inhabiting Samanosuke's body once a plan is put in place. The two consider this a fair compromise and agree, and everyone immediately gathers to begin brainstorming ideas. Thankfully, Ophelia is quick to bring up her ability to produce Genma insects, suggesting that they burrow in local plant life in order to begin producing the essence needed to not only restore the rest of the Triumvirate, but also eventually pull the Omen Star out of the underworld. She suggests that longer living plant life would be ideal, as the essence would only be produced for as long as the hosts survived, and Yuki suggests the idea of using trees since they can live for multiple decades at minimum. Ophelia thinks that would be perfect, and having now grown old enough to begin taking part in these discussions, Omio actually speaks up with an idea of her own, suggesting that they begin planting cherry trees as a sign of peace, slowly spreading them throughout Mino province. Confused, Yumemaru asks what that has to do with their plans, but Omio suggests that it would be noticed and slowly adopted throughout the country over the next few years, eventually spreading across all of Allied territory, allowing more hosts for Genma insects to produce the necessary essence. While they would prefer a faster method, they can't help but see that this could well be their best play, Guildenstern even calling the plan rather genius, while Eke looks at his daughter with the widest smile on his face. Rosencrantz is quick to suggest that they first focus what essence is produced to give himself and Claudius enough strength to manifest in their own bodies, allowing them to separate from their hosts. From then on, they will be able to produce insects of their own instead of only relying on Ophelia, increasing the essence that they can produce and focusing it on pulling the Omen Star from the underworld. While everyone acknowledges that this will be an extremely long-term plan, they all agree and decide to make preparations, beginning to plant cherry trees in highly populated areas of Mino province. As they are planted, Ophelia produces Genma insects to burrow into the saplings, slowly but surely beginning the process of producing Genma essence. With them using a far slower method than in canon, they predict that it could end up taking upwards of around 8 to 10 years before the Omen Star is freed, but are aware that there's no other way if they want to avoid detection from the Oni. Neighbouring clans soon take notice of the Saito clan's planting of cherry trees, and Yumamoru tells them that they are a sign of peace symbolising a united country, and they soon decide to do the same, with the Asai and Tokugawa clans among the first to follow Saito's example. What the Genma fail to predict is that the insects end up causing the trees to grow a little faster than expected, and as the trees begin to grow, the essence they produce slowly increases as well. Naturally, both the Oni and Hideyoshi notice what the Saito clan are doing, but are successfully thrown off as they simply assume that Yumamoru is celebrating his successful unification of the country under his clan. When Hideyoshi fails to get much more support for his rebellion outside of the Ashikaga and Yusugi clans, everyone else remaining satisfied under Saito rule, the Oni decide it best to simply focus on the awakening of the Black Oni. While they do consider retrieving the Bishaman sword from the Dark Realm for when the God of Darkness returns, they choose to wait until the last moment so as to not risk it being taken from Hideyoshi, since he would have to hold on to it in the meantime. By around 1582, some of the trees begin to blossom as they grow to around 8 to 10 feet in height, and while it remains scattered throughout the country, enough essence is gathered to allow the triumvirate to split from their hosts and manifest in their own bodies, albeit still not at their full power. With them producing more insects and more trees beginning to grow, they begin to redirect the essence to the Underworld Seal, hoping to further break it enough to both free the Genma still trapped within, and eventually free the Omen Star as well. However, while remaining hopeful that this plan could finally lead to the ultimate defeat of the Oni, Fortinbras is unable to shake an ominously bad feeling that something horrible is on the horizon. For the next few years, more and more provinces across the country begin to fill with cherry trees, and the public share the Saito's belief that they are a sign of peace across the land. In truth, very little happens throughout, with the humans in Genma maintaining their focus on freeing the Omen Star, while the Oni keep their eyes squarely on Ogimaru, waiting for the day that he fully awakens as the reincarnated Oni God of Darkness. The likes of Osric and Dantes spend these years training Saito's forces, hoping to build their skill to match the power of their new Genma gauntlets, and this training soon extends to their allies, such as the Asai and Tokugawa clans, leading to each of said clan's best warriors being gifted the Genma's power. In the Yagyu village, Jubei remains focused on training the next generation of Yagyus, using his knowledge of his Genma inheritance to help his own kin tap into it at an earlier age. Thanks to having already gained the ability to use his inherent Genma power, Munenori actually avoids falling prey to the accident that would cost him his eye, his increased reflexes being enough for him to dodge the attack that would change him. Since his mother doesn't die in order to save his life, he is given no reason to turn on the Yagyu, and by 1589 he is named the strongest of his generation, earning the name of Jubei. By now, having not only become accustomed to his Genma power, but also becoming a master of the Nito Ryu style, Munenori is effectively on par with his canon strength with the Demon Eye. In 1590, having turned 16 now and also receiving some training from both Dantes and Osric, Ogimaru has already become used to the Genma's presence, much to both the Oni and Takajo's frustration. While she had tried to instill doubts in his mind about them, their actions over the past 10 years as they reintegrated more and more into society caused Ogimaru to bury his doubts and accept their presence. It's around this time that Ieyasu ends up introducing Ogimaru to Yumamoru as the heir to the Tokugawa clan, and while they greet the young man warmly, they are able to sense through their gauntlets a hint of Oni power emanating from him. After this initial meeting, they are quick to consult the Genma about it, and while they initially want to investigate him, Fortinbras asks them if they think he is a natural Oni. Yumemaru confirms sensing Oni power from him despite having no gauntlet, and Fortinbras immediately worries that the Oni could have been successful in causing the emergence of the Black Oni. Kaede, however, mentions that Ogimaru seemed to be a genuinely empathetic person, and Tsubone agrees, suggesting that he may not even be aware of his Oni heritage. The group all agree that Takajo is likely involved in all this, but Eke suddenly hits upon an idea and proposes that they offer to train Ogimaru personally in order to keep a close eye on him. He thinks that Ieyasu would support the idea, wanting his heir to be as strong as possible, but also brings up the possibility that if he is truly unaware that he is an Oni, then they could build enough of a connection with him to turn him against them when the time comes. While Guildenstern does think it's a risky move, he does admit that potentially turning the Black Oni against his own kind could end up costing the Oni their greatest trump card. Since the Oni are already aware of and likely gunning for Ophelia, Claudius and Rosencrantz decide to remain within the Genma world while Ogimaru is present, just in case the Oni discover them too, and Yumemaru soon contacts Ieyasu with their proposal to train Ogimaru. Offering the best training possible with a good variety of teachers, Ieyasu sees the advantage and agrees, hoping that it will not only lead to Ogimaru becoming a powerful warrior, but also finally gaining control of his random spasms of power and rage. Takajo, still in disguise as Lady Oman, does her best to protest this decision, but Ieyasu remains firm and sends Ogimaru to Inabayama for his training, chalking her reaction up to simply not wanting to be separated from her son. Upon arrival, Ogimaru is given residence within Inabayama, and his training soon begins under Samanosuke, Kaede, Eke, and Yumemaru, the group hoping that a varied regimen will let him improve every aspect of his skills while also building rapport with everyone as opposed to just one or two. While he isn't quite at his canon strength right now, it is clear to everyone that he is nothing short of a prodigy, though it doesn't take long for them to realise that Tsubone was right in that he is completely unaware of his own Oni blood. This leaves them hopeful that if he manages to channel and control it, his empathetic nature will cause him to stand against the rest of his kind. The next year, Mitsuhide, his age now catching up to him, is left bedridden and on death's door, and with his last breath, decides to name Samanosuke the new head of the Akechi clan. Obviously having complete trust in Samanosuke, Yumemaru welcomes the idea, and with the Akechi clan also based in Mino province, Samanosuke remains able to stay within Inabayama. Upon his death, Mitsuhide is buried in Kyoto, where with Yumemaru's approval, Samanosuke constructs the Akechi tomb to properly honour his late uncle. As Ogimaru's training continues through 1591, he ends up suffering yet another violent outburst, much to the shock and concern of everyone in the castle. Given his strength, it takes the combined efforts of all of his teachers to calm him down, and he is left unconscious until later that evening, waking up with a very faint memory of what happened. When they question if he's okay, he realises that they were unaware of these episodes and apologises, having assumed that his father had already told him about it. He explains that it has happened every now and then since he was a child, but remains unable to understand why, clearly disheartened at the fact. This knowledge causes a great deal of concern and hesitancy among the group, but knowing that it is probably connected to his Oni nature, they promise to help him learn and control these outbursts, though don't outright tell him that they know why these outbursts actually happen. After a bit of discussion, they decide to ask Ophelia to contact Jubei, thinking that his experience in learning to control his own Genma power may be a good starting point with teaching Ogimaru to control his own. She agrees and is quick to speak to Sekishusai about it, and given that he has not only finished training the next generation of Yagyus, but is also, much to his confusion, still in his prime, he agrees to help, asking the newly named Jubei to come with him. Before they leave the Yagyu village, however, Sekishusai decides to ask his mother why he doesn't seem to be aging, and Ophelia assumes it to be because natural Genma are naturally immortal, with none having ever died of old age. She isn't sure if Jubei and his kin are also fully immortal since they aren't pure Genma, but proposes that they at least have far longer lifespans than pure humans. While he and Jubei are unsure what to think about this information, They decide it best to put that thought on the back burner, at least until the Oni have been defeated, and they both make their way to Inabayama to aid in Ogimaru's training. Given that knowledge of the Genma is public now, Ogimaru is already aware of their Genma blood and asks them if he is much the same, but they simply tell him that they aren't certain, just promising to help him understand and control it. His training continues for the next year, focusing primarily on understanding his power and controlling his outbursts, and while he isn't able to access the full extent of his power, he is able to get a grip on his outbursts and control them, much to his immeasurable relief. Not long after this happens, in late 1592, the Omen Star finally appears in the sky, enough essence having been gathered for the underworld seal to break entirely. However, it emits an ironically less ominous white glow as opposed to purple in canon, and the sight of this in the sky actually causes reverence across the land, the public believing it to be a good sign for the near future. With the star now arriving and Fortinbras beginning to feel its presence, they all decide to move on to the final stage of their plan. By now, with their accelerated growth, many of the cherry trees in Japan have become fully grown, and Claudius brings up the fact that while the Omen Star has been unsealed, they would need a large concentration of trees in a single area in order to begin pulling it close enough for Fortinbras to be able to regain his sealed godhood. Yuki suggests that since the land is already filled with trees, they set up a blossoming festival as a grand peace celebration, giving them a believable front to continue hiding their plans from the Oni, proposing that they base it in Kyoto. Once again, everyone considers this to be as good a plan as they can get, and Yumaru procures a large number of Bartha to act as sort of carrier pigeons, delivering letters across the country to announce what he dubs the Daigo Blossoming Festival. These letters also request that the clans donate what cherry trees they can to be used in Kyoto, again framing it as a gesture to symbolise unity across the country, and the vast majority of clans are quick to begin donating their trees and sending them towards Kyoto. The Oni begin to go into a panic as they realise that their seal on the underworld has been broken, worried that the Triumvirate have likely been freed as well, and they realise now that they've likely been fooled by the Saito clan's peaceful front. Now believing that these cherry trees are a part of their greater plan, the Oni order Hideyoshi, Yoshiaki and Kagekatsu to hinder them in some way. While the three Oni warriors focus on that, Takajo consults with the Oni themselves about their failure to keep Ogimaru on their side, and they agree that it's for the best that they come up with a backup plan just in case they can't rely solely on the Black Oni anymore. With the Omen Star now unveiled, Minogoro finally decides that the time to act is now, consulting Fortinbras about the possibility of opening passage to the Dark Realm. Now that the Oni are likely aware that the Underworld seal is broken, they're probably expecting the Genma sealed within to begin escaping as well, which makes this the perfect time to begin freeing the Genma imprisoned within the Dark Realm, the Oni thinking that they would just be others freed from the Underworld. Fortinbras agrees that this is the best time, and consults with the group about making trips to the Dark Realm to free its prisoners and eventually even retrieve the Bishaman's sword, since the Oni are still unaware of their ability to access it. Given that they are still in the middle of training Ogimaru, who is still unaware of not only his true nature, but the nature of the Omen Star, they decide to keep a rotation of tutors to allow for those not currently training him to head into the Dark Realm without him suspecting anything. As they are actively trying to free the Genma rather than fight through them like canon, the Dark Realm actually presents no danger to the group, and they are able to begin freeing the imprisoned Genma. Over time, they slowly but surely release and reintegrate the Genma prisoners, making sure not to free too many at once just in case it incites suspicion from the Oni. And with them too hyper-focused on awakening the Black Oni, they fail to notice that the Genma have begun to access the Dark Realm right under their noses. Not all is running smoothly, however, as Yumaru begins receiving reports that carriages of cherry trees bound for Kyoto are being raided by an unknown group of samurai, the culprits not wearing any banner or recognisable armour. When receiving word from the Tsugaru clan expressing concern of another potential raid, Yumaru decides to assign Osric alongside some extra Genma soldiers to protect it and attempt to learn who is targeting their trees. Taminobu Tsugaru welcomes the extra protection when they arrive in Mutsu province, and not long after they begin the journey to Kyoto, the carriage is intercepted after crossing into Shimotsuke province. The assailants are caught off guard when they realise that Osric and more Genma are protecting this carriage, and while they still attempt to set the carriage on fire, Osric and his extra forces are able to defeat them without issue. The Genma as well as the Tsugaru guards search the assailants' bodies, but they find nothing to identify them, worried that someone could be trying to undermine the entire festival. Regardless, they are able to reach Kyoto, and Osric returns to Inabayama to report what happened, suggesting that they use the increasing Genma to raise security across the board. They all agree that it's for the best and begin assigning squads of Genma to begin escorting the carriages, and while the attacks continue to occur, far fewer are actually successful in hindering the transport of trees. Once again, the Oni are left highly frustrated that the Genma and Saito are thwarting them at every turn, and with them beginning to realise that their enemies are catching on to what they're doing, they begin making the final preparations of their plans, now thinking that the Black Oni is their only remaining viable option. Unfortunately for them, as Ogimaru's training continues into 1593, he has built a genuine bond with his teachers, having reached his pre-Onigate canon strength by this time. While he is unable to trigger an Oni awakening, he is now in complete control of his outbursts, and Ieyasu is left extremely happy with his son's progress. As the number of trees builds up in Kyoto, the essence they produce begins drawing the Omen Star towards the Earth, and with most of the Genma prisoners freed from the Dark Realm by now, Minogoro suggests that now is the time to reach and retrieve the Bishaman's sword before the Oni play their hand. While Samanosuke, Eke and Yumamaru are rotated in for Ogimaru's training, Kaede and Jubei are sent in to reach the deepest level and retrieve the blade. With very few Genma remaining, their journey to the bottom of the Dark Realm couldn't really be any smoother, and upon reaching the lowest floor, they find and retrieve the Bishaman's sword, bringing the final batch of prisoners with them as they leave. With the infamous Bishaman's sword now in their hands, Guildenstern decides to keep hold of it for now until they decide whether or not to use it, still worried about the implication that it could destroy Genma and Oni alike. Soon, the Oni decide to finalise their own plans, ordering Hideyoshi to retrieve the sword from the Dark Realm, though warn him that the Genma that remain imprisoned within will make the journey to the bottom rather difficult. As they open the way there for him, Hideyoshi enters the Dark Realm only to discover it completely devoid of Genma, descending to the bottom to find the sword missing, thinking that something is clearly not right. The Oni wouldn't have felt the need to warn him of a danger that didn't exist, would they? He returns from the Dark Realm faster than the Oni expect, and as they initially assume him to be too weak to reach the bottom, they are left bewildered when he reports that the Dark Realm was completely empty, with both the Genma and the sword nowhere to be found. Incredulous that the Genma had outfoxed them again, they decide to check the Dark Realm themselves, utterly outraged and a little fearful when they realise that Hideyoshi was right, furiously questioning how the Genma managed to find a way inside without them noticing. They think back to the Onin War and remember that they had ensured that the Mino clan were rendered extinct when the war ended to ensure that no one else could access it other than themselves, but that's when they come to a sudden realization. A group of Mino had initially disappeared near the end of the war, and while they were presumed dead from being hunted by the Genma, they never actually received word of any bodies, only now realizing that they may well have faked their own deaths and joined the Genma, giving them access to the Dark Realm. Fuming as they are at this possibility, the Oni gods themselves are left horrified, not only knowing that this could well be their last chance at conquest, but that almost all of their plans had been handily outplayed. At this point, they put more focus on their final contingency plan in case the Black Oni isn't viable, knowing that they cannot act before their plans are ready, and they order Hideyoshi, Yoshiaka and Kagekatsu to attend the upcoming festival and launch their attack there while everyone else is distracted by the celebrations. With the Omen Star now about to reach the Earth, the festival is set to begin in Kyoto, with the general public now believing that the star is nothing less than a blessing from the gods. Many clans, including Saito, Asai, Tokugawa and Yagyu, attend the event, with Sekishusai and Jubei bringing the youngest generation of Yagyus with them, using the festival to remind them that this is the peace that they are all fighting for. Dantes, Osric and Hakuba are present as well, expecting the Oni to play their hand today, but as everyone enjoys the festivities, everyone is distracted by the sound of a large thud, and they all turn to see that Hideyoshi had made the first move, assassinating Ieyasu Tokugawa. As everyone moves to kill him for his treason, they are suddenly swarmed by soldiers led by Yoshiaki and Kagekatsu, realizing that this was now a full-blown rebellion. As the allies scramble to defend themselves, their forces initially being cut down due to the shock, all three of the rebellious lords reveal their gauntlets and draw their Oni weapons, rushing at the Saito lords as they are deemed to be the biggest threat. Having been watching from the shadows, the Triumvirate are quick to summon more Genma forces to join the fight, the three now having regained their full strength not only due to the amount of essence produced, but also the close proximity of the Omen Star itself. Once the shock wears off, the battle becomes more evenly matched, and with most of the Saito forces alongside some of the Tokugawa and Asai forces having gauntlets of their own, they are now left on par with the rebels, even with the majority of their own forces wielding gauntlets as well. This is helped when not only Dantes and Osric join the fight alongside many of the Genma summoned by the Triumvirate, but Hakuba sheds her disguise and finally fights in her Genma form, using her flight to outmaneuver the rebels. On top of this, it isn't long until the Triumvirate themselves decide to get involved, not seeing the point in continuing to hide themselves now since the outcome of this one battle will result in the end of either the Genma or Oni, so they need to pull out all the stops in order to win. While Samanosuke, Yumemaru and Jubei focus on fighting the rebel leaders, Sekishusai, Kaede and Eke work to get the non-combatants to safety, with the likes of Yuki, Tsubone, Luis, Omio and her mother also attending the festival. What the rebels didn't expect was that Kaede and Yumemaru were now in possession of Enryu and Boraito's orbs, with Yumemaru wielding a fire-based spear called Netsu, and Kaede drawing a lightning-based knife called Saiteki. Once the non-combatants are led to a safe place for Guildenstern to safely activate a Genma portal for them to escape, Kaede, Eke and Sekishusai join the battle to help fend off the rebel forces. However, there is one person who finds himself unable to join the fight despite wanting to. While Ogimaru initially draws lamentation in an attempt to avenge his father's murder, he is suddenly hit by a strange but crippling pain in his head, rendering him unable to move as he tries to fight through it. With everyone else too focused on the battle to really notice, Ogimaru looks up to find his mother in front of him, her slowly kneeling down to his level and beginning to whisper in his ear. The fight between the rebel and Saito lords remains somewhat equal, though does begin to shift against the Oni as they slowly get outskilled. The skill gap is most obvious between Jubei and Kagekatsu, with the former's mastery of Nitoryu being more than enough to block and parry every one of Kagekatsu's attacks, even using his inborn Genma power to slice through the ice as Kagekatsu attempts to use Hyojin Yari's magic. As Kagekatsu becomes more frustrated, Jubei is able to bait him into a desperate thrust, expertly parrying it with one blade and using the other to slash through his opponent, killing Kagekatsu. Assuming that Yumemaru has a heavy focus on raw strength, Yoshiaki uses Kuga in an attempt to match it, hoping to either break Yumemaru's guard or take advantage of what he assumes to be Yumemaru's slow movements. Unfortunately for him, he realizes that Yumemaru had already trained more than enough to remove that flaw, proving surprisingly faster than expected while also retaining his impressive physical strength. As he is able to parry and dodge Yoshiaki's attacks, Yumemaru is the one to use strength to his advantage, landing a powerful blow to break Yoshiaki's guard and capitalize, taking a final massive swing and bisecting his opponent. Hideyoshi, still vying for revenge, is locked against Samanosuke, but quickly realizes that his opponent is just far beyond him in terms of raw skill, and while he begins to lose his temper, he suddenly realizes that Yoshiaki and Kagekatsu have already been struck down, leaving him outnumbered. as his anger swells, his gauntlet begins to react, allowing him to transform into his Oni form and leaving him stronger than his opponents, at least for now. Knowing that they can transform as well now, he quickly uses his Shipu magic to clear the area around him and gain some distance from his opponents, taking the chance to rush towards Yoshiaki and absorb his gauntlet's power. As a result, Hideyoshi transforms into a true Onimusha, but decides that he isn't done there and absorbs Kagekatsu's gauntlet as well, making him even stronger than Nobutada was in this form. While the rest hold back the rebels, the Saito Lords attempt to dogpile Onimusha Hideyoshi, but with his power even greater than that of a standard Onimusha, they are unable to deal any damage. Now far beyond their strength, Hideyoshi now starts fighting to kill, the group left with no choice but to desperately attempt to defend against his attacks. Now able to do so at will, both Sekishusai and Jubei tap into their Genma power and transform into their Genma forms, attempting to double team Hideyoshi, but the Onimusha remains too powerful, retaliating against them with a powerful strike. In a split-second act, Jubei attempts to take the brunt of the attack, but the sheer force of it strikes and injures both of them, with Jubei taking a grievous wound and left near death. Seeing this as she fights off the Oni rebels, Ophelia shrieks in horror and rushes to their side, desperately trying to use her magic to save her son and grandson. Eke and Yumemaru try to push the Onimusha back with their combined raw strength, but they are just as easily blocked and struck back, and while Yumemaru is left heavily injured from the attack, Eke is struck even harder, breaking his spear in half and slashing through his body, sending him careening against a nearby cherry tree. Having taken a few blows of her own, Kaede gets on her feet and dashes towards Eke, only to find that the wound was so deep that even his heart and lungs were slashed open. Eke was dead. Having also taken a few blows by now, a heavily injured Samanosuke is left desperately trying to defend against the Onimusha, and Kaede musters all the strength she has to try and save him. As before, however, Hideyoshi notices and again swats her away, leaving her too injured to continue and starting to bleed out from her wounds. Annoyed at her constant interference, and perhaps hoping to hurt Samanosuke even more before killing him, Hideyoshi decides to kill Kaede first. But as he is about to deal the final blow, Samanosuke's own rage skyrockets and his own Genma gauntlet reacts, a massive pillar of green and purple light erupting from him. This is more than enough to grab Hideyoshi's attention as he witnesses Samanosuke undergoing his own transformation, and after everyone is forced to shield their eyes, the light fades as Samanosuke emerges as a new form of Onimusha. While everyone is horrified that Samanosuke may have been corrupted, they quickly notice that his own Onimusha form bears significant differences, with sharp protrusions on his shoulders, a set of horns on his head, and a blue orb in his chest. Seeing this, Claudius begins to believe that Samanosuke has become some sort of hybrid Onimusha due to the mix of Oni and Genma power in his gauntlet, Rosencrantz going so far as to identify Samanosuke as a Genma Onimusha. Hideyoshi instantly attempts to strike him down, but with both his Oni and Genma power, as well as now wielding the powerful Genma Samonji, Samanosuke actually proves able to block his attacks and retaliate, now able to fight on par with Hideyoshi. Once she is able to save Jubei and Sekishusai, Ophelia takes advantage of a distracted Hideyoshi and begins working with Hakuba to heal everyone else, starting with Kaede. However, she ends up just giving enough to ensure that they are not on death's door, and asks Hakuba to finish the job as she grabs Eke, promising to return soon as she warps away with his body. Hakuba, having significant control of her own magic, is able to stay and keep healing the group herself, and they are soon able to get back on their feet and continue the fight against the rebels. Having reverted to her human form to heal the group, Hakuba changes back into her Genma form to join them, and the rebels find themselves with their backs against the wall. Now beginning to overpower his opponent, Samanosuke starts pushing Hideyoshi back as well, and the rebel lord begins getting desperate, taking one final swing to try and land a single decisive blow. Samanosuke, able to see it coming, lands a powerful uppercut to disarm his opponent completely, before thrusting the Samonji through Hideyoshi's chest. In complete shock at his final failure, Hideyoshi slowly reverts back to normal and curses Samanosuke for destroying his dreams of conquest, Samanosuke removing his blade as Hideyoshi's corpse drops lifelessly to the ground. Samanosuke himself soon reverts as well, exhausted from such a hard-fought battle, and upon witnessing the death of their third and final lord, the rebels instantly realise that the battle is lost and surrender. While the Saito lords take the time to rest, their many allied clans are quick to call for the rebels' execution for their treachery, ignoring any and all of their pleas for even the tiniest ounce of leniency. While Hakuba works on healing the group's wounds and restoring their stamina, the Genma are quick to keep the surrendering rebels at blade point just in case they make any more moves. But this short lull in combat is suddenly interrupted as an unearthly scream is heard nearby. Everyone turns to see Ogimaru writhing in pain, realising that he had not participated at all throughout the entire fight, and Takajo, now shedding her human disguise, continually tells him to embrace his Oni power. As Ogimaru realises that she is an Oni, he is left in pained disbelief as she calls him her son, telling him to stop fighting and become the most powerful Oni that has ever lived. As the reality of his heritage finally dawns on him, Ogimaru lets out one final monstrous roar as his black power explodes from within, blasting everyone around him flying as he undergoes a transformation of his own. As the smoke slowly clears, everyone looks on in horror to see that Ogimaru had finally awakened as the fully reincarnated God of Darkness. Witnessing that her patience had finally paid off, Takajo is left elated that the god had at last returned, proclaiming that the age of the Oni is finally upon them all. The God of Darkness slowly lifts his head to see his now former allies, looking Samanosuke dead in the eyes as he readies lamentation to kill him. Having been left too weak to transform again, Samanosuke is left helpless as the Oni deity prepares to destroy him, but his attention is shifted when a blinding white light begins to shine behind him. He and Takajo look to its source to find Guildenstern and Ophelia standing in front of the serpent Fortinbras, the latter announcing to her that he had waited over 1,000 years for this moment and reaching his hand toward the sky. Only now does it dawn on Takajo that the Omen Star had finally reached the Earth, and she can only scream for them to stop as the light from the star begins to envelop the Genma Lord. As everyone shields their eyes, Fortinbras' serpent form begins to dissipate, and after over a millennia, Fortinbras finally returns to the world as the fully powered God of Light, warning Takajo that the age of the Oni has long since passed. The God of Darkness, feeling an almost instinctual anger upon seeing Fortinbras, immediately recognises him as the greater threat, and Fortinbras admits that he himself has been waiting for this fight as well, the both taking to the skies as their battle begins. As it does, Ophelia rejoins Hakuba and finishes healing the injured warriors, Takajo unable to stop her as too many of them were already back on their feet. Knowing that she is effectively trapped, she can't help but look back up at the battle between gods, watching to see Fortinbras just slightly pushing ahead of his age-old foe. In reality, the God of Darkness is held back by Ogimaru's consciousness, still able to see everything that he's doing as a god, but unable to regain full control of his body. The mental struggle against his Oni nature causes brief moments of vulnerability for the Dark God that Fortinbras makes sure to take advantage of. Now getting angry, the Oni god takes a particularly heavy swing, and as Fortinbras attempts to block it, the raw strength of the attack is enough to send Fortinbras back significantly, and Takajo uses that brief moment to call on the god to help her. Realising what she's doing, Kaede lunges at her, but even she is unfortunately too slow as the Oni god notices her call and flies down with unbelievable speed, impaling Kaede before she can kill Takajo. No one else is able to react fast enough to even try and stop him, and her lifeless body is thrown away as Takajo begins cackling with laughter, watching as the god prepares to continue its onslaught. As Fortinbras recovers from the Oni god's attack, He watches as both Sekishusai and Jubei attempt to fight back, now having been healed enough to transform back into their Genma forms, but their attacks prove useless as Sekishusai is brutally slashed, Jubei knocked back as well by the sheer impact of the attack. While Jubei and Ophelia are frozen in horror as Sekishusai's corpse drops to the ground, Ogimaru is filled with immeasurable guilt as he watches himself murder his teachers and friends. He can only watch as Ophelia rushes to Sekishusai's side and tries to heal him, only to realise that she is already too late, and as the God of Darkness effortlessly resists attacks from the rest of the group, the sound of Ophelia shrieking in raw grief pierces the area around them, and Ogimaru finally snaps. As the god is about to retaliate against an enraged Jubei, it suddenly stops dead and begins to almost tremble, while Fortinbras approaches to resume their battle. Takajo notices and tells the Oni god to kill them while it has the chance, but it begins clutching its head in what seems to be severe pain as Ogimaru begins pushing through its psyche. With one final thunderous roar of pain, a flash of power briefly erupts from the god until it's left hunched over, slowly recovering from the mental struggle. Everyone, including Fortinbras, are left frozen for a moment until Ogimaru begins raising his head, now in full control of his godly power and turning towards Takajo. After a moment, Takajo breaks the tension-filled silence and asks him what he's doing, but she feels a sudden chill in her spine as she meets Ogimaru's gaze, seeing only the purest rage as she is suddenly cleaved in half before she can react. As her bisected torso falls to the ground, Takajo realizes in her final seconds that Ogimaru had gained full control of his godly power, and he instantly goes on a full-blown rampage, tearing through each and every Oni rebel he can find, even those who had already surrendered. While he is no longer aiming for anyone else, allied forces are forced to jump out of the god's path to avoid getting caught in his wrath, and it isn't long before he manages to kill every single remaining rebel. Still raging, he begins frantically searching for more, but with no one left and no sign of him calming down, Samanosuke and Yumimaru rush in to try and ease his fury, trying to hold his attention and remind him that he has succeeded at controlling his power before. While it proves to be a significant struggle, seeing and recognizing their faces slowly but surely does manage to calm him down, eventually reverting back to his human form and dropping to his knees, the reality of what he did as the God of Darkness hitting him. Racked with guilt for the deaths of Kaede and Sekishusai, Ogimaru completely breaks down, and Fortinbras is able to recognize that their fight is over. With all of the rebels having been killed by the once rampaging Ogimaru, Claudius approaches him and says that not all things lost are unable to be recovered, also telling Ogimaru that in gaining control of his power, he had just thwarted the Oni's final plan. As everyone begins to tend to the wounded, they also take the time to grieve, Ophelia in particular left in pieces over the death of her son. But this somber moment is interrupted as Ogimaru suddenly screams in pain once again. Everyone turns to see that his dark power is being forcibly drained from him, effectively reducing his strength to that of his pre-Oni gate level as his godly power is ripped from him. It's at this point that a collection of 12 purple spirits appear around him, and Fortinbras is quick to recognize them as the 12 Oni gods that initially started the Onin War alongside the original God of Darkness, the spirits confirming and warning that they still have one final plan in place. The dark power that is drained from Ogimaru begins to split and seep into the Oni gods, strengthening them and causing them to regain their long-lost physical forms, each transforming into black Onimushas. Their individual power each surpassing that of a standard Onimusha, they declare that since the God of Darkness had failed them, they will take his place, dubbing themselves the Pantheon of Darkness. Now taking their place as the new Dark Gods, they vow to use their power to devastate the land and bring an end to the Genma forever, and the remaining Genma warriors prepare to make a final stand against them, Ogimaru doing the same as he manages to transform into his impure Black Onimusha form. Fortinbras, while weakened during his battle against the true god of darkness, still maintains enough power to contend with the Pantheon, while the others have more or less healed back to full strength, with Samanosuke becoming a Genma Onimusha, while both Jubei and even Yumimaru transform into their respective Genma forms. With this, the final battle begins, with the Pantheon having a significant numbers advantage as they outnumber their foes 12-5, and while Fortinbras is more than capable of handling 1 or 2 of them at a time, he is swarmed by 5 of them at once, still only being at around half power right now. While Fortinbras is being occupied, the rest of the gods split between their own targets, with Samanosuke, Ogimaru and Yumimaru faced with 2 gods each, while Jubei is stuck in a one-on-one with the final god. With their strength greater than a standard Onimusha themselves, Samanosuke and Ogimaru are still barely able to hold their ground, but find significant difficulty in finding an opening to exploit. Yumimaru is left in a far worse position, however, being clearly overwhelmed by the gods and forced into a defensive at all times just to try and survive. On the flip side, while the fight is actually rather even in terms of power, Jubei's raw skill ends up giving him a significant advantage, especially since despite their new power, what skill the Oni gods may have had has significantly rusted, if not completely forgotten, as they haven't fought anyone in over a millennia. It doesn't take long for Jubei to adapt to the god's attacks and outskill it, managing to parry a strike and land one of his own, wounding his opponent. In a rage, the Oni god attempts to retaliate, but Jubei is able to easily predict its movements and capitalise, redirecting the hit with one sword and attacking with his right, successfully impaling the Oni god before driving his second blade into its torso as well. Only now does it dawn on the defeated god that their skill had been practically lost after spending so long as incorporeals, horrified at the idea that even with their greater power, this could still be the final end for the Oni, its body dropping to the floor as it breathes its last. Having managed to slay the first of the Pantheon, Jubei is quick to see Yumimaru struggling and rushes in to even the odds, taking the attention of one of the gods and forcing the other to face Yumimaru alone. Fortinbras remains locked in battle against 5 gods at once, able to resist their attacks, but not able to find an opening for himself as there are too many to focus on. In an attempt to get a moment to recover, he musters as much power as he can in the moment and releases it, and while it isn't enough to kill any of them, the force of Fortinbras' energy sends them each flying backwards quite a bit. With his moment of freedom, Fortinbras looks over to see the others locked in combat and makes a split-second decision as his own foes recover, firing a blast of pure light at one of Ogimaru's opponents. Knocked off balance and injured by the sudden attack, Ogimaru is able to take advantage and knock the other god back, giving him the chance to lunge at the injured god and cleave it in half with a powerful downward swing. This leaves the other now locked in a one-on-one battle with the Black Onimusha, and while he no longer has his godly power, his natural strength as a Black Onimusha still proves too dangerous to fight alone. It doesn't take too long for Ogimaru to overwhelm the remaining Oni god and disarm it, successfully cutting down the 3rd member of the Pantheon. Now able to catch his breath with both of his opponents defeated, Ogimaru looks over at his allies as they continue fighting, and feels another huge wave of guilt rush over him, unable to forgive himself for those he slaughtered. As he tries and fails to process his guilt, he is suddenly approached from behind by Guildenstern, who tells him that he is still able to redeem himself. Ogimaru questions how after what he has become, but Guildenstern shakes his head and tells him that his blood is not what defines him and that there is still time to make things right, handing him the now unsealed Bishaman's sword. Able to sense its incredible power, Ogimaru asks why Guildenstern would trust him with such a weapon, and Guildenstern tells him that despite humanity's disdain for the Genma over the past millennia, he and the Genma still found it within themselves to care for them. He admits that while they may not be perfect, they still strive to do what they feel is right, telling Ogimaru that in spite of his Oni heritage, his unbreaking empathy makes him the most human of them all. That, above all else, is enough for him to trust that Ogimaru will do the right thing. Hearing this, Ogimaru looks back down at the blade in his hand for a moment, slowly gripping it tighter as he turns back to see Yumemaru and Jubei attempting to defend against two more gods. Faster than anyone can react, everyone is caught off guard as Yumemaru and Jubei's opponents are both cleaved in half, Ogimaru having used both Lamentation and the Bishaman's sword to cut them both down. Having seen this, the Oni gods are horrified to see him wielding their most powerful weapon as Ogimaru points it towards them, promising to bring an end to their little pantheon. One of the two gods fighting Samanosuke ends up quickly splitting off in an attempt to stop this new threat, another from Fortinbras' group doing the same. But Ogimaru is able to block an attack from the first and cut it down, the Bishaman's sword having skyrocketed his power. As the other rushes toward Ogimaru, Samanosuke takes advantage of his own situation and overwhelms the remaining god facing him, successfully using his Samonji to break its guard and cut down the 7th Oni god. With only 5 gods remaining, they are forced to further split off against their own target, leaving everyone in a one-on-one fight, and it only goes downhill from here for the Oni. Even having been weakened, Fortinbras proves far too powerful for a single Oni god, knocking it back and firing a massive volley of light bullets, completely shredding it to pieces. Still in his Genma Onimusha form, Samanosuke's strength successfully knocks his opponent off balance, driving his Samonji into its chest and ripping his blade upwards, splitting the 9th god in two. With both Lamentation and the Bishaman's sword, Ogimaru's opponent falls just as easily, as Ogimaru uses the Bishaman's sword's magic to cleave straight through, the sword's purple flames engulfing and disintegrating the Oni god. With only 2 gods remaining, Samanosuke and Ogimaru join Yumemaru and Jubei in their own battles, and their combined strength and skill proves far too much as the final 2 members of the Pantheon are finally cut down, spelling the final end for the infamous Oni gods. With the battle finally over, everyone reverts to their human forms as cheers erupt from both their human and Genma allies, everyone able to see that their final victory over the Oni had at last been achieved. Fortinbras slowly descends to the ground, offering both his praise and gratitude for making this victory possible, and as the dark power that the god stole begins swirling overhead, it seeps back into Ogimaru, restoring to him the full power of the god of darkness. However, given what this power caused him to do, he expresses how much he doesn't want it, blaming this power for all of the pain and death that they had endured. Looking briefly toward the now empty Omen Star, Guildenstern suggests that there may still be something that they can do, shifting his gaze to Fortinbras as the god gives him an approving nod and descends towards Ogimaru. With his godly power now returned, he tells Ogimaru that he is capable of taking his black power and sealing it away entirely, but warns that it will render him permanently weakened as a result. He asks if Ogimaru is sure that that is what he wants, and Ogimaru immediately agrees, saying that he would prefer to be a weak human than a dangerous Oni. Fortinbras smiles at this answer and raises his hand towards Ogimaru, telling him to let go of his power as he begins to extract it himself. And while the process is still rather painful, Ogimaru does his best not to resist. Eventually, every ounce of Ogimaru's Oni power is taken from him, and Fortinbras seals it within the Omen Star, sending it back to the underworld as it used to be. Ogimaru drops to his knees and does his best to catch his breath, now left with no Oni power whatsoever, yet despite being so weakened, he also feels rather light, realizing that for the first time in his life, he finally feels truly human. With this act, the Oni are effectively rendered completely extinct. With this done, Fortinbras begins to absorb every last bit of Genma essence from the trees, restoring him to full strength and announcing that there is only one thing left to do. As he charges his full power, he releases a flash of light that sweeps across the world as it begins to seep into every Genma alive, and they all begin to revert back to their original human-like forms. With the Oni gods now dead, Fortinbras had finally managed to break the age-old curse that they had laid upon the Genma, and a wave of celebration erupts from the Genma and Humanity alike, the final nail in the coffin that the Oni's oppression had come to an end. While many want to celebrate their liberation, others, including the Saito Lords, want to mourn those they've lost, but Fortinbras remains unconcerned, calling Rosencrantz and Guildenstern forward. Already guessing what he wants them to do, they immediately agree and ask everyone to give them some time, taking the bodies of the fallen, including Kaede, Sekishusai and Ieyasu, and returning with them to the Genma world. While everyone is rather confused, Fortinbras simply tells them to get some well-earned rest, ensuring that there will be time for celebration rather soon. Heeding his words, they all decide to return to their respective provinces, with Ogimaru being forced to return to Mikawa as the new head of the Tokugawa clan now that his father is dead. While he deems himself unworthy of the position, he receives significant support from multiple clans including Saito, Saigo and Asai. Jubei returns to the Yagyu village and reports the death of Sekishusai, and the entire village is quick to hold a ceremony in his honour, though they are rather uncertain why the Genma took his body. Jubei does try to ask Ophelia, noticing that she seems to have become hopeful rather quickly given her visceral reaction to his death, but she just brushes it off, saying that she's just taking in that the curse has finally been broken. Able to see that she's not telling him everything, Jubei decides not to push the matter, assuming that she is simply mourning Sekishusai in her own way. With the death of his father, Jubei is named the new chief of the Yagyu clan, and he vows to lead the Yagyu in a way that would make his late father proud. Samanosuke and Yumemaru return to Inabayama, sorrowfully reporting the deaths of Kaede and Eke, and Omiyo and her mother in particular take it the hardest, Omiyo breaking down entirely upon learning of the death of her father. Yuki and Tsubone grieve with Samanosuke and Yumemaru over Kaede's death, having long considered her and Samanosuke family by this point, and they all spend the next month learning to accept their losses. After said month passes, they receive a letter from one of the many restored Genma, this letter being a personal summons to every clan by Fortinbras to Kyoto for the continuation of the Daigo Blossoming Festival. While they are surprised to learn that the festival was being resumed after the disaster a month prior, they decide to heed Fortinbras' request and attend. The likes of Yumemaru, Tsubone, Yuki, Samanosuke, Nagamasa and Oichi, Ogimaru, and many more begin to gather at Daigo, wondering what Fortinbras has planned for the festival. Fortinbras and the Genma are quick to greet them all as they arrive, and he announces that it is long overdue that they begin a grand celebration of freedom now that the Oni are no more. While many are still in the process of mourning those they have lost, Fortinbras just smiles, calling forward a number of people, and everyone is left stunned as their once fallen friends, family and allies stand alive before them. Guildenstern and Rosencrantz reveal that they had spent the last month resurrecting those killed in the final battle, the Genma wanting them to have the chance to celebrate as well. Omiyo and her mother almost instantly begin sobbing at the sight of Eke, and he becomes rather overly emotional as well as he reunites with his wife and daughter. Having brought many of his clan with him, including Akane, Jubei and the rest of the clan immediately celebrate the survival of Sekishusai, Akane in particular breaking down as she embraces her grandfather. Despite knowing what Guildenstern and Rosencrantz had been doing, Ophelia can't help but begin crying as well, endlessly grateful that her son had survived. While not quite as overly emotional, Samanosuke and Kaede can't help but embrace each other, and Yumemaru, Yuki and Tsubone join in the hug, happy that their family had been brought back together. As for Ogimaru and Ieyasu, their reunion is a fair bit more levelled, and while Ogimaru still expresses a significant level of guilt, Ieyasu simply puts his hand up and tells him that it's alright, already knowing what happened after his assassination. After a tense moment of pause, Ogimaru can't help but embrace his father, and Ieyasu ends up shedding a tear or two as well, apologising for always being so stern with him and telling him that he is truly proud of the man that he has become. Content with these reunions, Fortinbras formally announces the beginning of the Festival of Freedom, and the celebrations begin. Having been significantly uplifted by the revival of the Fallen, everyone enjoys the festivities to the fullest extent, and it quickly becomes the largest peace gathering in history, filled with food, drinks, and a variety of forms of entertainment. It's no surprise to say that everyone has a fantastic time. As the festival nears its end, Fortinbras requests everyone's attention, calling for every clan leader to step forward. Everyone, including Imamaru, Samanosuke, Nagamasa and Motonari approach, though Ieyasu actually finds himself hesitating, inciting a bit of confusion as many had assumed him to take back his position as head of his clan. However, Ieyasu speaks up and announces that it is time that he stepped down, turning to Ogimaru and saying that he has proven ready to succeed him, officially naming him the new head of the Tokugawa clan. Ogimaru is stunned into silence for a moment, but Ieyasu simply gives him a warm smile and tells him that he's counting on him. After a moment of pause, Ogimaru returns Ieyasu's smile and nods, accepting his position and joining the rest of the lords with Fortinbras as the god descends onto their level. He recounts that ever since the beginning of the Onin War, both humanity and the Genma have suffered and splintered at the hands of the Oni, until their cruelty drove what felt like an impossible wedge between them, one that he feared would never be overcome. However, their efforts over the last couple of decades have finally managed to make things right, bringing their species together once more as they once used to be. Fortinbras extends his hand to the lords and vows that from now on, humans and Genma will stand side by side once more, hoping that should the Oni ever manage to return, they will face them together. One by one, every leader shakes his hand and vows the same, and when Samanosuke and Imamaru shake his hand, Fortinbras thanks them for making it all possible, admitting that if they hadn't stood with the Genma, they may never have managed to defeat the Oni today. Cheers of support erupt throughout the festival, and in the years that follow, the Saito shogunate continues unopposed. Despite the initial disruption of the festival due to the Oni, respect for the Saito clan skyrockets for having organised a peace gathering on a scale never before seen, and the small few remaining hostile clans soon pledge loyalty, finally completing the unity of the country. With the success of the festival, Imamaru Saito officially names April 15th the Day of Freedom, turning it into an annual celebration of their final liberation from the Oni. With the conflicts now over, Imamaru and Tsubone finally have a child of their own, a son that they name Yukimitsu, named after Yuki and Samanosuke's first name of Hidemitsu. Samanosuke and Kaede also settle down and marry at around the same time, eventually having a son of their own named Mitsumaru, named after Imamaru and the late Mitsuhide. The two boys grow up together in Inabayama and begin to see each other as brothers, and relations between the Saito, Saigo and Akechi clans grow tighter than ever before. As for the Saigo clan itself, with Tsubone being the closest to a clan leader that they have, she and Hikuba talk to Omio and offer to adopt her into the Saigo clan as its princess. Eke and her mother are delighted by the idea, and after having lived with the Saito family for over 20 years by now, she has learned more than enough from them to become a potentially good leader, accepting the offer. Her and her family move to Mikawa province, and Omio quickly proves to be an extremely benevolent princess, gaining the respect and reverence of the clan. Luis Frois decides to leave Inabayama not long after the festival, deciding that he wants to do and learn more throughout the country, and he bids his friends and allies farewell as he begins travelling across the land. Eventually, he reaches Kyushu, and after discovering and caring for a number of abandoned children along his journey, decides to open an orphanage there, adopting whatever orphans he finds and caring for them as his own. The Yagyus return to their village in Yamato, and Sekishusai extends his previous offer to his mother, giving her a permanent place within the village to call home. With no need to hide herself anymore, Ophelia accepts, delighted that she can finally spend time with her family without fear of being hunted. Following her integration among the Yagyu, Sekishusai, much like Ieyasu, officially names Jubei as the new chief of the Yagyu clan, confident that he will continue to lead the Yagyu in the right direction. Ophelia watches over her great-granddaughter Akane as she grows up, and she, alongside Jubei and Sekishusai, aids in training Akane's generation of Yagyus, the two quickly growing a close relationship. Ogimaru maintains his position as the leader of the Tokugawa clan, and while he still goes to his father for advice every now and then, he soon finds himself able to make most decisions himself, proving to be a capable leader of the clan. In 1596, he is contacted by the Asai clan, leading to him meeting the children of Nagamasa and Oichi, and he finds himself getting along particularly well with the middle daughter, Ohatsu. Her parents are quick to notice this and offer to arrange for them to be married the next year, and with both Ogimaru and Ohatsu being happy with the decision, relations between the Asai and Tokugawa clans are significantly tightened as a result. As for Yuki, while she does not marry someone despite her position as the Saito princess, she remains content living with her family until her eventual death in 1612. All of these events following the first festival are watched over by Fortinbras, now re-establishing himself as the god of light, seeing that humanity and Genma are mingling like they used to before the war. He smiles knowing that the Oni can no longer disrupt the peace for which they had long fought for over 2,000 years. And with that, our story comes to a close. Goodness me, there is so much to unpack here. I have to be frank, this is by far the most difficult scenario that I have ever written. The Cliff Notes alone took me almost a month and a half to finish, while the final script itself took another 2 weeks. It's probably had the most rewrites of any scenario as well, as on more than one occasion I had to completely scrap a couple of segments and redo them thanks to either missed or forgotten details, or stupid mistakes that I had made in my notes that led to inconsistencies. But I stuck with it since this whole concept gave way to so many ideas that I really wanted to expand on. Honestly, I think my favourite change was the role reversal between Takajo and Ophelia. I love the idea of actually making her Jubei's mother instead, which would certainly make more sense given that she isn't the manipulator we see in canon. Of course, with her actually being rather strong in her own right, she wouldn't go the way of canon Takajo and get killed off halfway through Samurai's Destiny. As for Takajo herself, making her a plant to try and drive a wedge between Nagamasa and Yumaru felt like a good way to introduce her more manipulative nature here, even if her initial attempt ended in failure. Giving the Oni an equivalent to the Triumvirate to make her their own priestess felt a bit too cliché, so I changed her role a bit to make her feel a little more unique, especially with her being the secret mother to Ogimaru. Speaking of, that was something else that I really wanted to expand on. Given how integral that Soki is in canon due to being the Black Oni, the idea of him fighting his Oni nature in order to stay human was something I loved, and I hope I was able to do it justice. Another thing that I imagine is going to raise a fair few questions is the lack of quite a few canon characters in this scenario on both sides, such as Ginkenfatsu, Jutudoma, Heihachi and Magoichi. Much as I wanted to give everyone a role here, there was no way that I would be able to add every familiar character while also giving them their own presence and roles. Like I've said in a couple of previous scenarios, if the purpose of having a character in the story is simply for the sake of them being there, then the story as a whole is better off with them not appearing at all. So I added those that I could give genuine roles while cutting out those that I couldn't. In a similar vein, I do wish that I was able to do more with Stellado instead of just a simple one-note moment that I admittedly really liked coming up with. But to be honest, that's not actually that different from his canon appearance in Warlords, is it? Next, there is the topic of Yumaru. I wanted to try and change things up with him this time around, not only making him a more prominent figure, but actually giving him the role of a proper leader as opposed to his usual role of simply being a drifter with personal loyalty to Samanosuke and Kaede. Given that Samanosuke teaches him the pointlessness of constant conflict during the Sengoku period, it makes sense to me that Yumaru would only accept the role as clan leader if he could spread his influence in more peaceful ways. Him gaining respect across the country for both the defeat of the Oda clan and the allies he would already gain would likely begin a domino effect of more and more clans wanting to avoid making him their enemy. And the idea of the Saito shogunate was a nice little change that I wanted to try out too. finally, there is the topic of his wife, Lady Saigo no Tsubone. Seriously, it took me over half an hour of research just to find someone at around a similar age that wouldn't throw off an already established clan, Tsubone being 4 years younger than Yumenaru. In the end, Tsubone felt like the best pick I could find, which ironically led to helping establish the responsibility that Ieyasu would place on Ogimaru, as well as his concern about Ogimaru's Oni-related outbursts. For those unaware, Lady Saigo was historically one of Ieyasu's concubines, and was also the mother of both Hidetada and Tadayoshi, the two sons of Ieyasu seen in Volume 2 of Knight of Genesis. With her marrying Yumenaru instead, Ogimaru is left as Ieyasu's sole male heir, forcing the Lord to rely on the Saito clan's aid to prepare him for his succession. I'm just glad at how well all of those pieces fell into place. With that, I think it's time I stop rambling. Thank you all for watching, and I'm sorry that this took so long to get done. On top of how difficult this was to write, a mixture of heavy burnout and a couple of health issues have slowed me down big time. Hopefully, with this now finished, I can give myself a bit of a rest and get back into the swing of things. I do still have at least 3 other scenarios that I'm planning on doing, so it's not like I'm out of ideas just yet. Either way, thanks for sticking with it everyone, and if you are a fan of Onimusha based content like this, be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any more. I would very much appreciate it. Until next time everyone, take care of yourselves. Danish, out.